Season 3 of Pokémon Horizons, also known as Terastal debut, is the most interesting season in my opinion of Pokémon Horizons because it finally starts addressing the question, how are our heroes going to get strong enough to face their adversity that they're going to face in the future? This arc does this by forcing our heroes to go on gym challenges, which is the old school style of anime, and it really makes for a seamless transition that allows our heroes to get stronger week by week. This arc also continues the storyline with the explorers as a major revelation happens in this arc, specifically regarding Amethio, and this arc has some of the most beautifully animated battles in the series so far. All this leads to an incredible arc, and this video is a compilation of all of my reviews that I did week by week all into one video. If there's any specific episode you want to watch, the time codes are going to be in the description. Let me know what you thought about this arc. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a brand new arc from Pokémon Horizons, the Terastal debut arc, begins in episode 46 and is titled How Thrilling! Naranja Academy. This debut episode helps set up everything going forward, so let's talk about it. So at the end of the previous arc, our heroes all knew they needed to be stronger, so Fried came up with the idea that they should enroll in Naranja Academy and take the Terastal course. However, unlike the game, this is set to be only a short course. That way our protagonists don't have to take all the other courses in the games that don't fit with this series. Liko and Roy are excited to go to school while Dot seems a bit shy. Liko will be coming in as a transfer student, so she's wearing her outfit from Indigo Academy. The other two get the Naranja Academy outfit. My first question when I saw this was, why did they choose Naranja Academy instead of Uva? Is that just an aesthetic choice, or will that actually play into the story? I.e., will we actually get some past Paradox Pokemon in this series? Keep an eye out on that. When they get to the school, Clavel and Gita gives them a brief introduction of the Terastal phenomenon and how students are coming over from other places to learn what the Terastal orbs do before giving each of our heroes a brand new orb. They then ask the student council president, Nemona, to take our heroes around the school and introduce them. Just like Liko's Pokemon have evolved, so has Nemona's Palmy, which has evolved into a Palmon. Nemona wants to battle Roy when they first meet, but Clavel asks her to perform her duties, so she takes our heroes around the school. They eventually come across two of the Elite Four members of Paldea, Hassel and Rika. Rika tells Liko that she's representing Indigo Academy, so Liko says that she will do her best. Once again, before Nemona and Roy can battle, the school bell rings, meaning they have to go to class. The class they go to is 1 and what looks like the letter A, a nice nod to My Hero Academia, as they enter Miss Dendra's Battle Studies class. They head outside to do some exercise, and here, we learn more about the course. We learn that students aren't allowed to battle each other with the Terastal Orb, which I think will be important moving forward. Also, each of our heroes will be doing 2 tests against the gym leader that they are given by the school based on their aptitude. One is the Basics test, and the other is Implementations. For the Basics, the students have to be seen as worthy by the gym leader. Jock then arrives to give our heroes the course through their Rotom phones and tells them to take pictures and videos for reports for his class too before leaving. I guess they're doing one more other class, which is research, which I bet you Fried asked for that our heroes do, since he's also a professor. Before our heroes leave the outside with Dendra, however, Anne notices Liko. It's a reunion after a long time, so the two talk for a while about how each of them have grown, each of them having evolved their first partner Pokemon. They then decide to have another battle against each other, the first one since Liko first got Sprigatito, and this battle here we get is really great. Lots of strategy shown by both, Anne using Duat's Scout Chop to hit Florgato from the back before following up with Aerial Ace, and Liko countering by taking space and using Florgato's Vine to get rid of Duat's Scout Chops before using Magical Leaf to KO it. As the battle is going on, the remaining Elite Four, including the champions, are out to watch it, and Rika says something that caught my ear. She says Gita was looking for more people for the league. Why would they bring this random fact up unless they plan on having someone in the story involved with that idea? Just a thought. Keep an eye out for that. After the battle, Anne says that she's frustrated, but she wants to battle again in the future after she gets stronger. Finally, they all head back inside and get their camping gears and their assignment. The gym that Liko's been assigned is Katie from Cortando, for Roy it's Brassius from Artisan, and for Dot it's Iono from Lavencia. Our heroes decide they will go to Cortando to do Liko's gym first since it's the closest town nearby. However, before Clavel can set off our heroes, Coral and Sidon, Rice Ball and Sandwich, nice nod to the dub there, arrives in school dressed up as students. And even though Clavel is skeptical since they aren't on the list of students, they're able to get in thanks to Charles. She seems to have infiltrated Naranja Academy as a teacher, and she's able to put their fake identities and enroll them as students. However, unlike Ash and Co., Liko, Roy, and Dot all notice these students as the explorers, but for now they decide they won't do anything, they'll just have to wait and see what to do. How the explorers are managing to infiltrate these things so easily is mind-blowing to me, but we do know that they have been asked for now just to keep an eye out on our heroes, and specifically Liko, so maybe they didn't want to go the Team Rocket route and just follow everyone running around with a balloon. And as the episode comes to an end, we see Orla working on fixing the Brave Olivine, and it seems that that'll take a while, but while she's doing that, Freed and Cap have their own adventure they want to go on. As he says, he's gonna follow a hunch, as we see him with the Pokeball holders that Liko used to store 3 of Lucius's Pokemon. A very well done first episode of a brand new arc. We get introduced to new characters, get told clearly what the focus of this arc will be, and how our heroes can go about accomplishing their goals for this arc. We're introduced to 2 side plots, one with the villains and other with another primary character and Freed. A lot happened this episode, yet it never felt rushed at any point. The way everything was told, it was fun, it was interesting, and on top of that, we got a really well-made battle with good strategies. I hope Anne gets more involved in the story, as I feel like we haven't really got to see her much in the story, but I have a feeling she's just going to be a measuring stick to show the growth of Liko, so I don't know if they have any other plans with her. It does look like we'll eventually get a Roy versus Nemona battle since they've teased it so much. I can't wait to see how Roy will get strong enough to contend with her. And as for Dot, her battle with Iona should be fun. They've set up a lot of fun scenarios here that I can't wait to see where the story goes. Overall, a phenomenal episode. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 47 of Pokemon Horizons titled Liko and Florigato. Put all your heart into it just dropped, and we get our first test for the Terastal course as Liko takes on Katie, the Cortando gym leader. How does it go? Let's talk about it. Our heroes arrive at Cortando, and one of the first things we learn is that Dot feels like her battles are more about cleverness rather than being physically strong, which is interesting and something to look forward to when she faces Iona. We also learn that Liko is extremely nervous for her battle. Once they arrive at the town, they smell the fresh bakery and head towards the place where the smell is coming from. Since all other Pokemon love their smell, they decide to go have a bite and love the dessert from the cafe. Eventually, we learn that Murdoch is there, and he's working part-time here at the cafe while waiting on the Brave Olivine to be fixed. That's where we hear some commotion downstairs and go to check out what happened. Similar to episode 43, turns out it's Coral, causing a fuss when the dessert she wants is sold out. Our heroes go to tell her to stop, and then some arguments ensue. Eventually, Coral challenges Liko to a battle, the winner being allowed to battle Katie since she only has time for one challenger today, and Liko accepts since she's never used Terastal Orb in a battle. That would be good practice for her. But the rules are the rules, and the rules say that students can't battle each other with their Terastal Orb. So instead, Katie says that the two will participate in another contest, a cake making contest, to decide who gets to battle Katie. When the contest starts, Liko works with a Florigato to make cake that looks fantastic. However, Coral doesn't know what she's doing. Instead, she tries to turn the cake into shaved ice and has Glalie use Blizzard on it. However, Katie is not happy with this and stares down Coral, harshly judging her, causing Coral to leave. And with that, Liko is considered the winner. Katie tells Liko to try her cake and turns out to be pretty good. And that's the wisdom that Katie wanted to impart on Liko. Sometimes you don't need to practice something like a terastalization. If you work with your Pokemon, you can just do it. So with that, the basic battle test is on. The interesting test about this battle is that it's really a battle that can only work in the anime settings. In the actual games, this really wouldn't work, and I've talked about this with other people in the past, but it felt like over time, the Pokemon anime went closer and closer to the games, but because of that, it lost a little bit of its charms in battles. You still got the occasional things here and there that only the anime could provide, but for the most part, it stuck pretty close to the game battle mechanics. That wasn't the case here, and I really enjoyed this change. This battle consisted of Katie's Teddy Ursa using Charm to stop Florigato close range from attacking much, and then Sweet Scent to stop it from focusing long range. And Liko can't seem to figure out what to do in her situation as her Florigato is getting pummeled by Teddy Ursa's Slash. Liko then has to remember what Katie said about how if you and your partner put your heart to battle, you can do it. So with renewed confidence, Liko has Florigato use Magical Leaf to block Sweet Scent from a distance, then continue using it to prevent Teddy Ursa from getting close range with Slash before terastalizing. That gives her the boost she needs as Florigato's Magical Leaf is able to send Teddy Ursa flying after she terastalizes. That's when Katie decides she's going to terastalize next. This turns her normal type Teddy Ursa into the bug type Teddy Ursa. It then tanks a second Magical Leaf from Liko before attacking with Fury Cutter, which KOs Florigato, meaning the battle is over. However, this is different from previous Pokemon series or even the games in that just because Liko lost doesn't mean she failed her test. In fact, the test doesn't really care if you win or lose your battle. The test is more about properly using terastalization at the right time and showing that you as a trainer are worthy. And even though Liko lost, she showed those qualities to Katie, meaning that she passes Katie's test. Liko tells Katie she will work harder going forward, and that's it for that. At the end of the day, our heroes have left Cortando and are camping overnight when they talk about Liko's battle and how the Terastal magical leaf was powerful and exciting, before we learn that Roy will be next as he looks forward to facing Brassius in Artisan. Overall, a really fun episode. If you've been a Pokemon fan for a long time, this really did feel like an old school Pokemon episode. Ash coming to town, dealing with some issue before facing off against the gym leader. It's a formula that's been around since the beginning of the series, but it works so well, so I understand why they're coming back to it. It is interesting that winning the battle isn't the priority here. It's really just using Terastal properly. And I guess that makes sense since they're really taking the Terastal course and not a battle course, but it would be cool to see our heroes return one of these days to these towns and actually win their battle. But the story is more about advancing our hero's strength slowly and surely, so I can understand why they might not want to do that. Liko lost her battle, so it'll be interesting to see how the other two fare. And also, one of them will probably fail their test by using Terastal incorrectly, so I wonder who that's gonna be. So many questions arriving from this episode. I can't wait to see where it goes. Overall, a fun episode. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 48 of Pokemon Horizons titled Shine. The glimmering fire and arc just dropped, and we get Roy facing off against Brassius for his exam. How will it go? Let's find out. Continuing from the previous episode, this time, it's Roy's turn to take his basic exam as he arrives in Artisan. However, it isn't a normal day in Artisan. Instead, there's an art festival going on, and it seems like Hassel, the Elite Four member, is helping out. We learned that Hassel is a mentor to Brassius. We also see that Alex, Liko's dad, was invited to the art festival. However, Roy doesn't care about any of that. Instead, he just wants to battle. However, Brassius is too busy working on an art piece for the art event, so he says he can't battle for now. However, Nemona's in the area, so she's willing to battle Roy. We get a short battle, but it shows that Roy's gotten much stronger as he's able to use Disarming Voice and Flamethrower on Palmont to do some damage to it. However, the battle changes when it begins raining, and Roy's too focused on winning to pay attention to that fact, causing him to use a fire move in the rain, which doesn't work, which leads to Fuecoco's defeat. And when Nemona goes to talk to him about the battle, Roy is insistent that he lost because of the rain and wants to battle again. Seeing this, Brassius tells Roy that he can't win no matter how much he tries as he is right now because he doesn't understand battling, so he will never master Terastalization. Their match is now on hold indefinitely until he can figure it out. Roy's devastated. However, since there's an art festival happening, Hassel says that our heroes should try making their own art for the festival, with the theme of the festival being making art with their Pokemon. And even though Roy just wants to battle, seeing how much Fuecoco likes art, he relents. The gym here is where the art supplies are, and we learn more about the hero's personality through their art. Liko uses painting and works well with their Pokemon to create colorful art. It's supposed to represent her more colorful nature, along with how much she understands her Pokemon. Dot works on a mechanical art piece, showing intelligence and technology, and how she's able to utilize Pokemon in her art piece. And Roy works with clay. He's more of a physical art person. When Fuecoco sees a Charizard painting, they decide they want to make that with their clay mold, but he's struggling with the art piece. As he's trying to figure out why he doesn't like it, Brassius tells Roy that clay isn't the only material he has in his disposal, and that he needs to try and figure things out outside and use that as the clue to create his art. Roy doesn't understand at first what that means until Fuecoco accidentally uses fire on the clay and hardens it. Roy sees that and likes the color of it, and Roy realizes what Brassius was talking about. He can use his Pokemon's moves to help him create his art, so he gets back to working, eventually putting together the Charizard piece. We go outside to see everyone's art piece afterwards. Nemona made artwork depicting her Palmont in the heated battle, Liko made a very colorful Arboliva surrounded by her Pokemon's paw prints, and Dot made a mechanical machine with the help of all of her Pokemon and Roy's to make that thing light up and spin. And then we see Roy's Charizard. It's pretty big, it grabs everyone's attention, and it has these things in its arms, its eyes, and mouth, and tail, and the artwork doesn't really fully complete until he has Fuecoco light them up with Flamethrower. Seeing how well it all came together, Brassius tells Roy that he hopes that by telling him to use clues outside of his material, he understands that he can now use that same philosophy for battle. So with that, Brassius accepts his challenge. This is a really tactical battle, as well as a nice setup of a battle, where Roy's gonna start off with a disadvantage against Sudowoodo, but if he can manage to force Brassius to Terastalize, then he can get the advantage. I really like that. Brassius watched Roy's battle with Nemona, so he's able to keep his distance with Substitute and Stone Edge since Fuecoco uses Disarming Voice and Flamethrower. Roy has to try and figure out how to get close and counter Brassius. While he's trying to do that, he has Fuecoco use Flamethrower constantly, and eventually he sees it. The battle place is getting hot due to the flame, so Sudowoodo starts sweating, the real one. This allows Roy to correctly identify and use Fuecoco's Stomping Tantrum to attack it over and over again. Eventually, Sudowoodo is getting tired of getting hit by Stomping Tantrum, so it Terastalizes. Roy Roy then also terastalizes, and when Sudowoodo goes for Trailblaze, Roy surprises Brassius with a new move, Flame Charge. That's followed up by Flamethrower, which allows him to KO Sudowoodo, giving Roy the victory. Afterwards, Roy explains to Brassius how he was able to identify the correct Sudowoodo, and Brassius passes him on his basics classes. Fuecoco is hungry after the battle, so they all want to go out to the food stands in the festival, and that means next up is Dot, and that's where we end the episode. This episode addressed one of my many criticisms with the story in Horizons, at least temporarily. We'll see how it goes moving forward, and that was that it seemed like Roy was just being left behind. Liko was shown as the more empathetic person, the leader of the group, the stronger trainer in terms of battle because her Pokemons are already evolving, and her being the person who tends to do the most damage to the villains anytime she comes up against them. Roy has always been shown not to only be a step behind, but his story of the battling Rayquaza got completely taken over when it was merged with the story of Terapagos. So he feels like he has no story, because we know that Rayquaza has to be caught by Liko to advance that story anyways. And because of that, his place in the story felt shallow and redundant. We didn't really know what he was gonna do, especially since Dot is the brains of the group. This is the first time where it feels like they're finally separating him and allowing Roy to shine as the battler of the group. Liko lost her battle against Katie, so I thought they would do the same with Roy, but no. He showed that he was able to hold up against Nemona, and he was able to beat Brassius. That's a major shift in what's been his character so far. Out of the three kids, now he looks like the strongest battler. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how long that lasts because Dot still has her stuff, and Roy's story hasn't really advanced much in a while. But I'm glad to see something still happening in that front regardless. Like I said earlier, I like this challenge from Brassius better because in the first one, Liko was in a disadvantage against Katie, and she's never able to get anything going until she terastalizes, then she promptly loses. Here, it seems like there's an actual lesson where once Roy's able to figure out the first bit of the challenge, terastalization is his reward. It feels more meaningful that way. I also like that we're getting to see Nemona more often. Our heroes don't really have a true friendly rival in this series since they're constantly moving around and being chased by the villains, so Nemona being that fits well. I hope we get to see more of her in the future. Overall, a really fun episode. 2 battles in this episode and progression for our heroes. A satisfying one as well. Thumbs up for me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 49 of Pokemon Horizons titled Dot and Nidothing just dropped, and as Dot prepares for her battle against Iono, we learn that Dot gets nervous when cameras are around her when she isn't in her Nidothing costume. Will she be able to get over it in order to battle against Iono, who's planning to livestream the match? Let's find out. Our heroes arrive at Lavencia City for Dot's basic exams. It's not just our heroes, however. It looks like the rest of the explorers are also there. Dot thinks that Iono might be too busy to meet with them before the test. Nope, turns out she's free. Not only that, we find out that she's the one who told Freed about the dock where the Brave Olivine is being repaired, and also the place where it looks like it was originally built. I always thought for some reason that the ship was built in Hoenn, but I guess that's not the case. We do learn that Iono doesn't live in Lavencia, which is surprising, and this is also where we learn that the test will be live streamed by Iono. So before her battle, Iono wants to do rehearsals, and in order to do so, Roy will battle against Dot. However, when the battle begins, having cameras all around Dot, who's not in her Nidothing suit, makes Dot so nervous that her battle with Roy goes awfully. She doesn't give any commands and isn't able to work with Quaxly at all, and this leads to Roy getting the victory. Since Dot is so nervous with cameras around her, Iono says that she'll make an exception and allow Dot to do her battle as Nidothing. Dot arrives back at the ship and grabs her suit, and then begins the live stream outside, something she says she might do earlier in the episode. In the stream, she's just going around Lavencia talking about different places and things like that, and you can tell that when she's in the suit, she's a completely different person. It seems she's actually comfortable when the cameras are on her when she's in her suit. She plans on announcing that she will battle against Iono as Nidothing. However, Liko senses that Dot herself might be forcing herself to have all that excitement when she's outside in the Nidothing costume, and that she might not be okay with that battle. And while Dot seems to deny that, Quaxly seems to feel the same way as Liko. However, before that can be discussed, they have to deal with the Varoom. It is taunting Tinkatink by driving around it before Dot recalls Tinkatink. It then goes after our heroes, but during the process, accidentally takes the Nidothing suit to the middle of town, and everyone begins recording because they see that a battle is about to take place. Quaxly decides it's going to battle on its own for a while because Dot is so nervous since everyone is recording, and it gets to a point where Liko and Roy want to jump in the battle to help Quaxly, but Dot decides she will battle. Even though she's nervous, she focuses for the battle. At first, she studies the movement of Varoom. She then has Quaxly repeatedly use Water Gun to get it close before using Low Kick to do massive damage to it before finishing it off with Water Gun. After the battle, Quaxly and Varoom seem to be friendly, and as the battle ends, Iono comes out in the big screen screen in the city, and she announces that Dot, not Nidothing, will be the one doing the test battle against her. Iono saw that Dot was able to battle outside even with cameras, and I guess that is what her test ended up being, similar to how making art and making food were the catalyst to getting the battle for Roy and Liko respectively. For Dot, it's getting over her nervousness of having cameras around when she's outside. And while everyone was distracted, Liko and Roy were able to take the Nidothing suit without anyone noticing. Dot returns to the alleyway where they were earlier and apologizes for yelling at Liko and Roy. She says that once she started battling with Quaxly, the camera stopped bothering her, and this is the first time Iono called her Madam Dot, so she'll be battling as herself. We end the episode by going back to Iono and seeing that while she is a bit sad that Nidothing won't be battling, meaning less views, she is looking forward to battling Dot, and that is where we end the episode. I'm glad that we finally get to focus on a character and their battles against the gym leader for more than a single episode. I was hoping we would get something similar like this for Liko and Roy, but I guess they've already had a bunch of episodes about them where we've learned more about their personality, so there probably just wasn't a need to. But for me, it's not just about the people battling, it's also about the gym leaders. Maybe I'm just used to episodes from the previous anime where Ash would go to the gym leader to know the gym leader one episode before battling, because when this episode did that, a similar feeling happened where we learned a bit more about Iono. In this case though, the focus is more on Dot because we learn a bit more about Dot and how she's way more comfortable as Nidothing around cameras. This is something that I think that's true for a lot of video makers actually. This is something that in the modern day is also super relevant, so shout out to the writers for thinking about that issue and having it be addressed here. What a perfect place to bring it up in an episode with two influencers. I actually think that's smart. I can't wait to see what type of battle we get between Dot and Iono because Liko fought a normal type that turned into a bug type. Roy fought a rock type that ended up being a grass type. Dot doesn't get the luxury of either. She's going to be battling Bellibolt, who's electric, and then when it terastalizes, it's still electric. And she's going to be battling with her Quaxly, she's going to be at the disadvantage the whole time. I'm fascinated to see what Dot pulls out here to get the victory. Or maybe she won't. I don't know. I have a feeling that evolution might be the solution in this case. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 50 of Pokemon Horizons titled Dazzle Terastal. Dance Dance Quaxly just dropped, and this episode, Dot faces off against Iono for her exam in an incredible work of animation. How did it go? Let's talk about it. We learned a bit more about Dot before this battle that helps set up the battle. Nidothing does a video with Iono announcing the battle, and there, Iono talks about how the challenger will be true to herself in the battle. That phrase really sticks with Dot, who tries to figure out what being true to herself means. She brings in Liko and Roy to ask them about it, which is a nice bit of character development, as in the past, she didn't want them to come in her room. Dot thinks that since the previous battle against the Varoom, she had a plan and managed to execute it, that's who her true self is. So, she's gonna take that approach to the battle, including doing some simulation battles on how Quaxly could beat Bellibolt. She seems really prepared. We also learn a bit more about Nidothing here and what made her go viral. She was doing a stream where she messed up when trying to throw a Pokeball, got turned around, her green screen fell everywhere. That, plus her Quaxly having fun in that clip, caused the clip to go viral and in turn her channel to blow up. Remember this brief moment because this will come back later in the episode. In the morning, it seems that Dot might have figured something out. Whenever Murdoch and the rest of the Volt Tacklers want to go with her to the battle, Dot tells them no because they're being a bit too excessive with their celebration. Principal Clavel then arrives at Lavencia. He begins talking to Coral and Sidian, however, he keeps talking and, well, seems like someone who loves talking. They even walk away before he even notices. So, when he comes across Liko, Roy, and Dot, he wants to talk about how their lessons are going so far and how their adventure is going so far. Luckily, Dot is able to slip out to get to the battlefield for the battle in the middle of Lavencia. That battle we get here is incredible. It's streamed out, but since last episode Dot got used to the cameras being on her, it doesn't seem to bother her here at all. Dot's strategy is to dodge the sparks and use Water Gun from above. However, with Bellibolt having Electromorphosis, it causes Bellibolt to get stronger when hit by an attack. That allows Iono to have Bellibolt use Discharge, a move that can't be dodged, which does massive damage, especially with the Electromorphosis boost. Dot then has Quaxly continually dodge sparks and counter with low kicks, which the animation for looks incredible. However, even though Bellibolt is taking massive damage, it's able to recover all of it using Slack Off over and over again. And that, plus it accumulates damage to charge its Electromorphosis more and more as it just continues to use Slack Off instead of attacking. There's water all over the floor, so as Iono is about to use a massively charged discharge, the electricity goes everywhere and shuts off the stream. And while that's happening, Quaxly's having a blast, jumping around in the puddle of water. This is when Dot Dot truly realizes what her true self means. And similar to the mess up in the stream that caused her to blow up, it's about when things go wrong, which in this case is the stream going off, it's having fun in the face of a disaster situation. Dot decides this is where she's going to terastalize here, since Quaxly's having a blast. She decides to use the movement that Quaxly's doing on the water to use low kick multiple times on Bellybolt. The third time she has Quaxly go attack, the low kick transforms into liquidation, which does massive damage to Bellybolt. A brand new move. That's also when the stream for Iona returns. Iona then uses this opportunity to battle a bit more seriously, and also terastalizes her Bellybolt. She then has it use Discharge, which along with the massive buildup of Electromorphosis and the terastalization boost on top, creates a massive discharge that KOs Quaxly. The winner is Iona. Even though she lost, Dot says that she had fun when Iona asked her about the battle after the match up to the stream. Iona says that that's what's important. Trainers need to have fun. And with that, Dot passes her basic exams as Iona sends her viewers off with a goodbye. After the battle, our heroes meet up with Clavel, who congratulates all of our heroes on passing their tests before asking them to return back to school. However, on their way back to school, he asks them to make sure to take in the sights and sounds of Paldea and also write the reports for Jacques. The episode ends with our heroes stuck as Clavel continues to talk and talk and talk, this time to Dot, about streaming. This was a really incredible episode, both in terms of learning a bit more about Dot, the character, and Nidothing, and then also the battle itself. The battle itself was a spectacle, fit for a stream. Incredible work by the Horizons team, who managed to consistently have excellent animation compared to what we got in Journeys. There were dynamic angles and incredible one-off shots like the one where Quaxly's using liquidation here. That really did enhance the episode. I really like what this did for Iona. She always felt a bit like a goofball character with no real seriousness, but here we can see that she does have a serious and mature side to her. She's able to bring out the best in Dot by forcing her in an uncomfortable situation, which forces real growth. I'm glad that we got to spend a bit more time in Lavencia than we did in the other two battle locations, because that was really enlightening. And also, shout out to the audio department. The Kanto Battle remix theme was something I was not expecting, which got me hyped. Hopefully, that remix gets to make its way over to the dub so that people watching on Netflix can also experience the fantastic sonics of this episode. Overall, a phenomenal episode with animation that'll be hard to top moving forward. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 51 of Pokemon Horizons titled Thorny Florigato, the Mysterious Flower Pillar just dropped, and this is an episode where Florigato gets jealous of Liko's other Pokemon. How will they patch that up? Let's talk about it. After finishing their basic tests, our heroes are out there in Paldea trying to figure out which Pokemon they want to do a report on. After setting up their camp, Liko, Florigato, Roy, and Fuecoco run towards a pinecone that's in a tree. When it falls, when Roy accidentally bumps into the tree, it explodes, causing them all to get dirty. Liko's cleaning up her Pokemon, starting with Hatena. Just before she's about to start cleaning Florigato, however, she gets distracted, and this happens multiple times, putting Florigato in a bad mood because it feels like Liko is just ignoring her. Florigato is even getting a little bit jealous of how much attention Liko's other Pokemon are getting, so when Liko goes to pet her, her fur is spiky, which Liko feels. As the Pokedex says, Florigato's furs get spiky when they're upset or angry. Roy decides he wants to study a Kilowattrel for his project, and Liko doesn't know yet, but that's when Dot shows Liko something called a flower pillar on her computer that she wants to study. It's basically a tornado that has flowers all over it, and no one knows how it happens or why it happens. As Liko is learning about this, Terapagos goes wandering into the forest, so she, along with an upset Florigato, have to go find it. Terapagos goes near a river before getting smacked by a Lechonk across the river. While looking for Terapagos, Liko and her Pokemon get separated. Liko falls into a gorge, and Florigato and Hatena eventually find Terapagos when they go near an explosion they hear. Terapagos is alright after it got blown up. Florigato is annoyed and turns Terapagos from its back on its legs, only for Terapagos to go into a group of Pineco, causing Florigato to grab Terapagos and run the other way. As Liko's stuck in the gorge, she sees a massive group of Toedscool come down there. After she looks them up in the Pokedex, she screams when a Toedscool pops up in front of her. Florigato hears that and arrives, angry and ready to defend Liko. Seeing how scared the Toedscool are, she runs to grab Florigato, thorns and everything, until she calms down because she realizes that the Toedscool aren't there to hurt her. The Toedscool then point towards the vine above the gorge. gorge. They help Liko and her Pokemon get out of the gorge, and Liko has Florigato use Magical Leaf to remove all the vines. This allows the Toad School to get what they want, which is wind comes into the gorge to create a massive tornado, allowing Toad School to jump into the tornado to shed their petals. This is the flower pillar that Dot was talking about earlier to Liko, which is said to bring happiness to anyone who sees it, and Liko hopes that it brings happiness to Florigato. She gets back to the camp to tell the others what she saw, but as Dot says, she didn't get a video or photo of it. However, Liko decides she will draw it since she has a good memory of what she saw. She's just happy that Florigato seems happy now, and that's where we end the episode. A very Pokemon focused episode that was a good change of pace after 4 battle episodes. I like that they addressed some of the similar issues of the middle stage evolution that Go also had to deal with in Pokemon Journeys. It seems like even the creators realized the middle evolution of a starter is really the awkward evolution, and everyone else realizes it too, so addressing it to show that it's okay to be in that stage, especially for a show for kids who might be watching who might also be going through changes in their own life, is a great message to give. Toedscool and Toedscrew are some of the stranger Pokemon from Paldea, so it was great to see them given more personality here. This is the first time where I was able to look at those Pokemon and be like, hey, they're separate from Tentacool and Tentacruel. They aren't just variants, they are actually convergent evolutions. That's impressive to do. Overall, a solid episode that seems to be leading to something big next episode. A potential evolution? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 52 of Pokemon Horizons titled High Wind Warning for Wattrel just dropped, and in this episode, Roy's Wattrel evolves. How? Let's talk about it. Continuing from last episode, our heroes are still in the wilds of Paldea, looking for their research subject. Liko's trying to take a video of a white Squawkabilly, which are pretty rare, but failing to do so. Dot is trying to take video of Applin, but her Tinkatink is making it hard. Meanwhile, Roy's recording a Capsakid, and while doing so, his Fuecoco is bringing him berries so they can watch how the Capsakid eats. Seeing how easily Fuecoco is getting the berries now, especially with the use of Flame Charge, Roy's Wattrel tries to get berries too, but keeps getting one-upped by Fuecoco. Eventually, too much noise from his Pokemon causes the Capsakid to run away. Afterwards, Wattrel tries to fly to the tree to grab the berry, but strong wind pushes it away, and it looks dejected. At night, as they're eating, Roy explains to the others that Wattrel tends to give up quickly when the wind stops him, and he doesn't know what he can do to help it. At night, Roy wakes up to find out that his Wattrel isn't with him. He goes outside and eventually spots it behind a tree and sees that it's trying to train. He tries to cheer it up with his song, however, Wattrel isn't having it. Then all of a sudden, all of them hear a howling noise and get terrified. They see a giant imposing silhouette figure run towards them, and it jumps on Roy, except it turns out to be a Houndstone, and specifically, it's Rhyme's Houndstone. She tells Roy that she heard his song to Wattrel and could see that he's passionate. She then raps to Wattrel about how you shouldn't run from your fears, you should face it. That's when the Capsakid from earlier shows up again and starts running through the forest. Although this time, it's strange because Capsakids don't normally show up at nighttime. Rhyme says that it's probably because there's a Pokemon in the forest that, quote, isn't of this world, that's causing a bunch of Pokemon to be scared, and she's in charge of finding that Pokemon and trying to tame it. She also learns Roy's taking the school course, which might come back in the future based on the way that they had her react to it, and she tells Fuecoco to keep it going before disappearing. The next morning, Roy tells Liko and Dot about what he learned from Rhyme regarding this mystery Pokemon. He also says that he recorded Capsakid at night, but his phone didn't record anything. Dot says that she might have to teach Liko and Roy how to record using their phones. They then once again split up to find their research. Liko once again fails to record much of the white Squawkabilly, but this time this is due to her Pokemon making too much noise. Dot is too distracted taking dazzling videos of Quaxley instead of trying to find Pokemon, and Roy is looking for the Capsakid from earlier while Fuecoco is still getting berries for other Pokemon. When Wattrel once again tries to get berries from the tree, only for Fuecoco to easily run up it with Flame Charge, Wattrel gets annoyed and throws the berry back at Fuecoco. The two begin squabbling and Roy tries to get them to stop, but when he first blames Wattrel instead of Fuecoco, Wattrel heads off. Once again, Roy has to look for Wattrel when he hears the Capsakid from the previous day. It looks like it fell in the cliff below. Roy decides to go help it. Fuecoco's terrified when he's tiptoeing across a narrow cliff edge, and this is seemingly justified when part of the cliff falls off. Fuecoco's soul comes off on this scream. When Fuecoco screams because of this, Wattrel comes back to see what's going on. Roy then lends the hands towards Capsakid to grab it, but it bites him instead. When it throws capsaicin in Roy's mouth, it's shocked when Roy loves its flavor. Eventually, it trusts him enough to come over to him. However, Roy has to now figure out how he can bring it back up the cliff because he can't climb with one hand. That's when Roy's Wattrel decides it'll face its fear and do it. It dives to where Roy is and gets pushed around by a wind for quite a bit, but eventually it's able to grab Capsakid and fly to the top. During this time, by the way, Liko and Dot also arrive after Liko Liko's Hatena sensed that Roy was doing something dangerous. Roy then begins climbing back up the cliff while Liko and Dot are terrified, but when the wind blows extremely hard, they seem justified as Roy falls off the cliff. Roy's Wattrel dives to save Roy and in the process evolves into a massive Kilowattrel. It flies in the air for a bit before bringing him down, and Roy says that he wants to write about this and hope that Dot recorded it, but turns out Dot also forgot to record. A nice episode-long gag that concludes here. As the sun is setting, Fuecoco wants to and is excited to when he gets to fly on Kilowattrel's back, and Roy seems pleased. Before we end the episode, however, we get to see the eyes of the mysterious Pokemon that was scaring Capsicid at night and the Pokemon that Rhyme was referring to, and that's where we end the episode. If you played Scarlet and Violet or looked at the next episode preview, then you probably know what Pokemon it is. I won't talk about it for this video since we don't know how it's going to affect the episode itself. However, for this episode, I enjoyed it. It felt very slice of life until the cliff bit at the end, and I'm glad that Wattrel evolved. I know that a lot of people were saying that they thought the evolution was a bit rushed because Wattrel hadn't done much, but honestly, all small bird-style Pokemon had this evolution in the anime because early bird stages Pokemon are really tough to do things with. With Roy getting a Kilowattrel now, similar to Freed, he can fly around, giving him more to do. He can almost be the scout of the group now. Things like that are hard to do with a smaller bird Pokemon, especially one whose story is that it struggles to fly, so I don't mind it. I also liked Rhyme showing up here. The intro has all of the Paldean gym leaders in it, so I could see all of them showing up at one point or another in the season, and I really hope they do. I also want to know what the research for the other two will be because I'm sure it's going to lead to more stuff. As for this episode's ending, I wonder what the setup here is for. Like, randomly having this two-parter for this mysterious Pokemon seems kind of strange. Is someone gonna catch it? Probably not, right? Because it's a super powerful Pokemon. So I'm curious as to where this is heading. Overall though, a fun episode that is seemingly leading to something intriguing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 53 of Pokemon Horizons titled Hatena and the Otherworldly just dropped, and in this episode, Liko's Hatena evolves. How? Let's talk about it. Last episode, Roy learned about a mysterious Pokemon in the forest from Rhyme that has been terrorizing the local Pokemon. So, this episode begins with our heroes looking for this specific Pokemon in the forest. They come across a group of 3 that look kind of similar to them and even have similar looking Pokemon with them having a Roserade, a Darumaka, and a Ducklet. We don't learn their names, but they do tell our heroes that they're also doing the Terastal course. However, on their way to a gym, they got lost in the forest. They then came across a river and a very scary tree. On their way out of the forest, the girl who has the Roserade, her backpack broke, so she cut a vine from one of the trees to fix it. But that's when the mysterious Pokemon got angry and started chasing and attacking them. Roy hears this and he wants to go even more now, thinking that this is the mysterious Pokemon that Rhyme talked about. Seeing that our heroes are crazy for wanting to go after this Pokemon, the other 3 leave. Our heroes then head deeper into the forest where they see a bunch of Mankeys agitated beyond what's normal. Then comes a mysterious Pokemon who screams and arrives in front of them. This mysterious Pokemon turns out to be Annihilate. The reason it's called otherworldly or out of this world is due to how its Pokedex talks about how when its anger rose beyond a critical point, this Pokemon gained power that's unfettered by the limits of its physical body. Seeing how strong this Pokemon is, our heroes decide they'll need to fight to get away. We get a small skirmish between our heroes and the Annihilate, working together with Water Gun, Magical Leaf, and Flame Charge, and they're able to eventually get away. However, as they're getting away, Liko's Hatena senses that something is bothering Annihilate. They then come across the same river that the 3 talked about, and there they see a group of Mankey near a tree holding up a broken vine. They come to the conclusion that that tree and that vine must have been important to the Mankey, and that when that girl broke it to fix her backpack, she accidentally broke something really important. And since the other 3 look and have similar Pokemon to our heroes, the Mankey colony they're in think that they're the ones who did it. The Mankeys and the Primeapes group up and show up and begin throwing rocks at our heroes, as our heroes are trying to tell them that they weren't the ones who did it. Then, the Primeapes charge at them, so our heroes begin fighting back with their Pokemon. They're able to keep themselves safe, even when Mankey throws a rock at Terapagos, who just came out of Liko's backpack. Liko's Hatena is able to stop the rock with his telekinesis or a psychic move. The show doesn't really make it clear. Then, the Annihilate arrives once again. The Mankeys begin clearing a path. Our heroes think that maybe this Annihilate is some sort of guardian. Spoiler, turns out it's not. And once again, a battle begins. We get a fantastic remix of the gym battle theme from the games, and once again, it's a 3-on-1 as our heroes' Pokemon block the Shadow Ball before they begin on the attack. They use their strongest moves and Annihilate just kind of bats it all away. They realize that they have to surround the Annihilate to attack it, however, it just tanks their attacks. Hatena is scared, but then it sees that there are a group of Mankey going crazy near the river looking at the tree. escape, so it goes up to them and asks them what's up. The Annihilapes move as they're attacking our heroes, hit the Mankeys and the Primates surrounding them, so the other Pokemon begin battling this Annihilape too. Once Hatena learns what happens and goes back to our heroes use this time to see what Hatena saw. Turns out the vine that the girl from before cut was connected to their tree food source. That's why they were so mad. So our heroes begin making something that can help them get back to their food, a rope bridge. Seeing our heroes help make the rope bridge, the Pokemon stop fighting. Our heroes build the bridge using the Pokemon's help, and they're able to finally pull this bridge across to the tree. Once they set the bridge up, the Mankeys, the Annihilape, the Primates all go near the food tree, and they're happy. As they begin stomping near the food, they shake the area, and a giant rock tumbles from the cliff above, hitting all the Pokemon. This upsets every single Pokemon, and once again, they begin fighting amongst each other. In fact, they're fighting so much that some of the Primates are now evolving into Annihilapes themselves. So now there's 3 Annihilapes all fighting each other, along with Mankeys and Primates. Seeing this once again, Hatena jumps out of Liko's hoodie and goes towards the 3 Pokemon. Overwhelmed with this strong emotion, it covers its ear once it gets near before evolving. It evolves into a Hatchrim. Its Pokedex entry here is perfect because the entry says, no matter who you are, if you bring strong emotions near this Pokemon, it will silence you violently. And when you read that in the game, it's like, huh? But seeing these 3 Annihilate fight how strong they are, that's exactly what Hatchrim does to them. It uses a super effective brutal swing to KO all 3 Pokemon, and then it heals them afterwards. How terrifying. As it turns evening, all the Pokemon are seemingly calm now and eating the berries near the tree. Our heroes are glad they got to see everything so far in the wild, and they're seemingly now ready to write their reports as well, as they're excited to meet more new Pokemon and learn more. As the episode ends, our heroes head back to Naranja Academy. A fun episode that just shows how kind of brave and fearless our entire group is. If this was the Ash crew, for example, Ash might have been excited to fight Annihilate, but the rest of his crew wouldn't have been. Here, all 3 of them are looking forward to seeing what's ahead, which is a refreshing change of perspective. The battle we got, while short, were fun to watch, and I like a good 1v3 that eventually turns into a brawl because it allows everyone to shine. It's weird that though this Pokemon that they kind of hinted at and showed to be incredibly scary just stopped fighting once our heroes began fixing the bridge. That was a bit strange. But besides that, I thought their portrayal of Annihilate was great. They made them out to be incredible looking, which made it even better when Hatchrim destroyed them so easily. It made it really live up to its Pokedex entry, and I love that. A really fun episode with a nice evolution to boot. A worthy episode. Go ahead and check it out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 54 Pokemon Horizons titled Eternal Blessings just dropped, and in this episode, Freed gets into some deep trouble as an item related to Laqua and Terapagos goes missing and he is seen as a culprit. How will he get out of this situation? Let's talk about it. This episode begins with Liko, Roy, and Dot on their way to Mesagosa. However, Dot is exhausted from walking. As they're on their way though, Anne arrives. She's glad to see everyone, and we learn that her ultimate goal is to win the Pokemon League. For now, however, it seems like she will go with our heroes back to Naranja Academy. Meanwhile, Frida's been trying to solve the mystery of Terapagos by reading Lucius's personal notes and Liko's grandmother's adventure logs. We learned that the brave Olivine is halfway finished being fixed. Fried, while reading through the journal, thinks that he may have stumbled into something, so he heads out. He calls Liko and Roy to ask them if they remember seeing a pink haze when they saw the memories of Lapras or Galarian Moltres. The 2 say they do, and this is the confirmation that Fried needs. Fried arrives in front of the building we learned is called the Exceed. Once he gets in, he apologizes to the director inside, Director Crave, for leaving so abruptly as he was hired there. The director says that ever since he read his thesis, he knew that Fried wasn't the type to just stay in a lab. Fried then asks him about the research they did for something called the Eternal Blessings. The director says he doesn't really know much about it since it was handled by an external team. However, he gives Fried access to his card from the past and tells him to see if that will help by allowing him to go to the lab. There he comes across one of his old co-workers with a Joltik. He asks him to help him look up the Eternal Blessings research, and we see young Fried in the lab, and we also see this Eternal Blessings thing is a small crystal. Frieda wants to know everything about it. However, the research for it is seemingly restricted. Bizarre. So, since he has his badge, Fried decides to go down to the vault and check it out for himself where it's stored. However, someone is listening on this conversation. And things are getting more fishy as the lights in the vault when Fried gets down there are closed, and even though the project has been closed for a long time, there's security Pokemon guarding the area. Fried fights his way through, and Cap even breaks the camera that they're in, causing the alarm to go off. Keep that in mind. I have a feeling that's that's gonna come back in the future. Inside the vault, they look around and find an empty case. Turns out the Eternal Blessings Crystal is called the Aquarium. When they leave the vault, outside, there's security guards waiting. Once again, Freed has to fight his way through and flies off with Charizard. Something isn't right. There's too much security detail for a project that was supposedly finished a long time ago. Turns out the person from before who was listening in on the conversation between Freed and his old coworker, and now the person with the aquarium, is Spinel. He apparently also works at this company. When Freed gets outside and he's trying to figure out who got to it before him, we see Spinel's Behem also watching him. It is weird to watch one of our potential heroes doing a breaking and entering. You usually never see that, and then running away from the police/security guard. That's something you don't expect. It'll probably not be as big of a thing as it would have in real life, but it's still interesting to see nonetheless. As the end of the day arrives, Anne thanks Liko for the day and talks about how she was nervous when she first came to Paldea. However, having Duat and Sandshrew allowed her to feel like they could take her anywhere, and that's a different perspective that Liko hadn't thought about before. She always thought that maybe she was trying to take Terapagos to Laqua, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the Pokemon is taking her somewhere. That's when they arrive in front of Narhana Academy. The end of this episode is where we get some major revelations. Amethio arrives at the Explorer's boss, Gibeon's place. Gibeon tells Amethio that he wants to hear Amethio's resolve. They're trying to get more Laquarium and the true key to their plans, Terapagos. Once Terapagos awakens, by which I assume they mean once it becomes its Terastal form, they'll snatch it, and that's when the bombshell is dropped, that Gibeon is Amethio's grandfather. What's more is that we learn that Amethio has a very strained relationship, because Amethio says he's nothing like his father and he'll get stronger to serve his grandfather. What in the world could be going on here? There's so much mystery afoot here. Amethio then gets a call from Anya and Zerk where they see that Spinel is speeding off in a car. Amethio tells them not to pursue him any further as his suspicion that Spinel is plotting something else on his own is confirmed. And the episode ends with Amethio saying that while he failed to capture the shiny Rayquaza, he won't fail his next plan. This episode's so different from all other episodes we've gotten in such a long time. There's a lot of different elements being introduced here. The Exceed Company, the study of this crystal Aquarium, how it's related to Terapagos and Laqua, the fact that the explorers have infiltrated so many aspects of Paldea, including school and now this company, as Spinel also works there, the introduction of the fact that the main boss of the Explorer is Amethio's grandfather, and that Amethio has a strained relationship with his father, and Spinel's own plans away from the Explorers. I don't think any other episode of Pokemon has ever introduced this many mysterious aspects of the story that we really won't know until it happens. I don't really have much to say about everything that was introduced because while I am curious to see where it will go, unlike in the past where you could kind of tell where the story was headed based on the games that the anime was based off of, this is a completely original story. I'm not sure how this is gonna resolve or where this is headed at all. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 55 of Pokemon Horizons titled Showdown. The Paldea Elite Four just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes will team with their gym leaders that they trialed against to face off against the Elite Four. How will it go? Let's talk about it. After our heroes are back in Narhana Academy, Director Clavel explains to them that he has something fun planned. That something turns out to be exhibition matches against the Elite Four. At first, our heroes are nervous, but they become less so when Nemona tells them that they will be tag team battling with their gym leaders as their partner, meaning first, Dot and Iona will team up, and the Elite Four they'll face the Steel-type Poppy. The rule here is that the students win even if one of the Elite Four members' Pokemon is defeated, but loses if the student's Pokemon is KO'd. And also, the gym leader is not allowed to terastallize because it's for the students. The battle between Dot and Iona versus Poppy is a good one. It's between Quaxly and Bellibolt versus Caparaja and Tinkaton. Poppy uses Sandstorm for her double battle strat. I wish we got to see this style more in the games too. Iona sets up a Reflect, allowing Quaxly to get some hits in without taking too much damage back, but Poppy's Pokemon brush off Quaxly's Water Gun and Liquidation. Poppy then breaks the Reflect with Tinkaton's Brick Break before using Rock Slide. However, Bellibolt takes the brunt of the attack and has to use Slack Off to recover. That's when Dot gets an idea. She has Quaxly jump on Bellibolt's stomach to activate its ability, since according to Mr. Jock, its ability activates when its abs shake from impact. This allows it to charge up. Then, after dodging a Gigaton Hammer from Tinkaton by bouncing it in the air, Iona tells Dot to terastallize, and so she does, going blow for blow against Tinkaton's Gigaton Hammer. It sends both Pokemon flying back. However, this distraction allows Bellibolt to get on top of Caparaja Kaparaja, so with its charge being super high due to Dot's strategy, a single close-range zap cannon is able to KO Kaparaja, giving Team Dot the win. Even though they won, Dot feels like she didn't do much. Aono basically set up everything for her and got the win, but Poppy tells her that she's thinking too hard and hopes that next time they battle, it'll be a lively one. Hearing this, Dot tells Quaxly that she hopes to get stronger with it and Tinkatink. However, a massive explosion occurs as the next person is up. A fun battle with some nice choreography and strategy in display, and while Poppy's only 9, she's shown here to be wiser than her age. That's the same thing with Iono, who's also shown to be way more powerful in this battle. Her ability and her Pokemon are shown to be able to provide both massive defense while having powerful offense. It's so different from how she's shown in the games. The next battle is a short one. Coral uses self-destruct on everyone in the field, and everyone's KO'd. She loses because of it. However, while we don't get much here, we can learn a bit more about what Coral did in her studies. The person she faced off against in her gym battle was Kofu, the water gym leader from Koskarafa. He bought out his Wiglet for his battle here, and the person they faced as their Elite Four member was Larry, who's also the normal type gym leader, but in this case, he's using his flying type Pokemon from the Elite Four. We also learn here a little bit more about Coral, as we learn that she cares about winning amongst everything else, regardless of how it's done. The next battle is Roy and Brassius versus Hassel. This is a great battle for Roy because Hassel is a dragon type gym leader, which is the type of Rayquaza. Brassius uses Dolliv, and Hassel will use Flapple and Baxcalibur. Roy starts off by having Fuecoco use Flame Charge and gets protection from Brassius' Dolliv. However, the move seemingly doesn't do much. Roy has to have Fuecoco dodge Baxcalibur's Glaive Rush. That's because Brassius didn't tell Roy about Baxcalibur's ability, Thermal Exchange, which boosts the attack of the Pokemon when it's hit by a fire type move. So instead, Roy hits both of Hassel's Pokemon with Disarming Voice, which is super effective. Hassel then has Flapple use Grab Apple, which hits Fuecoco because he thinks it's an actual apple, so when it comes close up, it doesn't dodge. That's pretty funny. Roy decides he will fight fire with fire, so he has Fuecoco use another flamethrower, which is supported by Dolliv's Helping Hand. That gets countered by Flapple's Twister, causing a massive fire tornado, and Hassel has Baxcalibur jump into the tornado to increase his attack even more using Thermal Exchange. Fuecoco manages to dodge another Glaive Rush when Dolliv stops Fuecoco by using Grass Knot. Roy has Brassius then use Seed Bomb, which he then has Fuecoco cover with flames with Flamethrower, but Hassel uses Double Protect. Brassius then has Dolliv follow up with Energy Ball, which Roy responds by terastallizing and having Fuecoco use Flamethrower on top of the Energy Ball. However, a weird thing happens where the attack doesn't actually attack Hassel's Pokemon, it just kind of floats in the air and sends out weak fire projectiles. That didn't make any sense to me. So Hassel has Baxcalibur use Blizzard to freeze their attack midair, and then uses it to block the Glaive Rush's view and KOs both Fuecoco and Dolliv, the winner being Hassel. Roy, after the match, in contrast to Dot, is excited about the battle he just had. He talks about how he worked with the other Pokemon well, and says that he learned that battling is done better together, which also causes Hassel to get emotional. A nice battle, but not as well done as the Dot one. A majority of the battle is fine, but the ending where the Energy Ball and the Flamethrower just kind of hover there and do nothing made no sense to me. Either attack or miss. Why are you just staying there? No clue. This means Liko's up next, but before that, we get another short battle. This time, Rika takes on Sidian and Tulip and beats him pretty quickly. Tulip, the Psychic-type gym leader, uses her Espathra, and Sidian obviously uses his Garganacl, while Rika uses Clodsire and Diglett. We also learn a bit more about Sidian here, as he says that he can't allow his backup to go down, meaning that during battle, he's usually the type that goes first or takes attacks meant for his other partner's Pokemon. Liko hands her Terapagos over to Dot, as she will battle with Katie, who will use her low kicks against Rika's team. Rika's on a winning streak now and ready to go, and that's where we end this episode. A battle-focused episode isn't something we usually get in Horizons often. Some of the battles worked, some of them didn't. However, it is a unique episode for Pokemon Horizons, who doesn't tend to feature that many battles, especially of this tournament style, so it's good to see. While the animation for these battles weren't the most extravagant, they did have some strategy to them. When multiple battle episodes happen in a row, usually only one of them gets great animation, so I'm assuming that's what's gonna happen next episode for Liko. However, I am curious as to where this is heading. Once all of the battles finish, then what? That's why I think something will be set up next episode to push the plot forward. And the teaser shows it has something to do with Terapagos. Either way, it's gonna be a fun two-parter, and I can't wait to see the conclusion to this, as well as the battle between Liko and Rika. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 56 of Pokemon Horizons, titled Liko vs. Rika, Beyond the Battle, just dropped. This episode is the conclusion to the exhibition match as Liko and Katie take on Rika of the Elite Four. How did it go? Let's talk about it. This episode has two story threads running through it. The first one is the battle between Liko and Katie versus Rika, and the second one is regarding Dot, Terapagos, and the introduction of Penny into the anime. Let's talk about the battle portion first, since it's the emotional core of the episode. Liko's super nervous to start the battle. Even Rika can see it, and tries to get her to relax. she's successfully able to do so before the battle begins, but it shows that Liko is not really a battler. The Pokemon involved in this battle are Florigato and Lokix on one side, and Dugtrio and Paldean Wooper on the other. I won't go move by move here since this is one of those battles that I think needs to be watched, but the main idea is that Liko early in the battle is struggling to both work together and pay attention to the battle. She's too caught up in what she needs to do properly. So throughout the battle, Rika tells her the things she needs to focus on is winning the battle, and questions why she wants to battle. This gets her going, and she's able to battle a little bit better, dodging multiple moves and countering. This even piques the interest of Gersha, the Ice-type gym leader. However, in the middle of going for a quick attack, Florigato has to be saved from poison jabs by Lokix, who takes the hit. It gets poisoned, which causes it to activate Swarm, and we get an awesome looking bit of action here, where Lokix goes crazy and gets some great damage in on both Rika's Pokemon, lowering Clodsires attacks and paralyzing Dugtrio in the process, but it eventually succumbs to the poison jab and gets KO'd. This leads to a one-on-one. Liko is able to use Florigato's vines to get some solid hits on Clodsire with quick attack before Florigato gets hit with Mudshot. Liko's getting excited the more and more this battle is going on, and she's excited that someone as strong as Rika is going all out against her. When Rika once again asks her a similar question she asked early in the episode about why she wants to do Pokemon battle, Liko understands now and says that it allows her to immerse herself into the battle and sense how Florigato feels to get closer to it. This leads to the final moments where both trainers are going all out and both Liko and Rika terastalize. I thought at first there were rules against that, but I think those were just for the gym leaders, not for the Elite Four. A single Earth power from Clodsire KOs Florigato, which means the winner is Rika. However, after the loss, Liko gets super emotional and starts weeping, and she doesn't know why. Katie explains to her that this is probably because this was the first time she was really invested in the battle as something more than just a battle. Afterwards, Liko meets with all of her friends after the battle, and she tells everyone that they did great, which surprises everyone. She thanks Rika for making her like battles even more. Afterwards in the hallway, she's approached by Gersha, the Ice-type gym leader, who says that if that battle was enough to raise her spirits, then she's pretty frigid before leaving. This is obviously setting up a battle between the two. The second thread of this episode, regarding Dot and Terapagos, leads to something smaller but a bit more interesting. In this bit of the story, where Dot loses Terapagos and goes into the school library to find it, we learn a couple of things. First, Dot loves occult magazines, the book that had the fictional Pokemon and things like that. When Terapagos goes into the library and she's trying to find it, eventually Dot comes across Penny, who's holding the Terapagos bag. We learn that Penny works in the school database system, and she noticed Chalce's info came in the school database out of nowhere, so she's been suspicious and been keeping an eye out on her. While talking, Terapagos once again goes down the stairs, so Dot has to go downstairs and grab it and hide it from Chal, who by the way, Dot doesn't seem to recognize. She then sees the book that Chalce was looking at, which is the Scarlet book, and that's where she goes to the page that contains the picture of the stellar form Terapagos, which Terapagos seems interested in. She exchanges information with Penny in case she finds something on Chalce and leaves. Currently, our heroes, while having Dot, aren't technologically savvy enough to beat the explorers, who seem like they're a step ahead in everything. If you played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, then you know that Penny is a character who's an incredibly smart hacker. So, in order to counter someone like a Spinel, who's doing all of these behind-the-scene things, it seems like Penny will be the answer that our heroes need. She makes it back to Liko's battle before it ends, and after Liko's exchange with Gersha, Dot brings and shows the book to Roy and Liko, who notice it kinda looks like Terapagos, before thinking about their future adventures ahead. And that's where we end this episode. So let's talk about the battle portion of this episode first, which is the emotional core. This was an evolution in Liko's character. Liko hasn't been someone who loves battling. She isn't like a Ash or even a Roy to that extent. However, going forward, it looks like she'll be more interested in battles and other things besides Terapagos' adventure and trying to get her to Laqua. I do wonder though what that will mean for Roy and Dot. For Dot, I'm not as worried about. But for Roy, I've said this a few times, but they're slowly chipping away more and more of his personality and giving them to Liko. Before, Roy was the battle of the group. Now, Liko, on top of being the emotional core of the story, the person with the Terapagos, and the person trying to capture the Rayquaza that Roy originally had, is also going to be someone who loves battle. If that's the case, I'm not sure what Roy's unique characteristic is even in this story. And for the second thread of the story, it does seem like this episode is a connective episode that will lead to the next arc in this series. I was wondering with this Terapagos story being such focus, if any of the Scarlet and Violet elements would make it into the anime, and thankfully, it looks looks like we will be getting some parts, specifically regarding past Paradox Pokemon, as some of them are brought up here by Dot in this episode, specifically Slitherwings and Screamtail. This series has been very deliberate in what it usually brings up, so the fact that these two were specifically mentioned means that we'll probably see them in the future. Overall, I like this episode, a battle-focused episode that advances both a character and a plot and introduces a new character. I am looking forward, cautiously, to see how both Liko develops, hopefully not to the detriment of Roy, and the story moves forward, as it seems like elements of the Scarlet and Violet game will finally be implemented into the anime. I can't wait. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 57 of Pokemon Horizons, titled A Terapagos I Don't Know, just dropped. In this episode, we get a bit of a history lesson on Paldea's past and Terapagos before our heroes get their next gym battles. So let's talk about it. This episode is an interesting one because in terms of plot progression, the only major thing that happens in this episode happens at the very end. That being that our heroes get their next gym battles to go to for their Terastal course. This time, they're allowed to use 2 Pokemon for battle, and for their battle, Liko gets Gersha from Glaciato Mountain, Roy gets Rhyme from Montevera, and Dot gets Larry from Medali. However, the rest of the episode is really about setting things up for the future of the series, as well as talking about the past to explore where Terapagos might have come from. Our heroes have a celebratory lunch with the rest of the Voltaclers, where we learn that when they return from their Terastal course, the ship will be ready. But for now, Frida set up a meeting with Geeta and Director Clavel. There, they show them Terapagos, and the two are shocked, as they've never seen one in real life. Geeta then shows them some old images in Terapagos and its Terastal form, and talks about how it was written in the Scarlet book before showing them the stellar form from the book. They also introduce here Area 0 as being the place where Terapagos was last seen, but the records from them really haven't survived much. However, they don't know much about Laqua or the ancient hero or any of that, so for that, they have Miss Rayford. We meet her in her Zoroark, which is a bit of a prankster. She's doing some field work, which is to get some treasure, so she invites her heroes to come with her. The treasure she's looking for, specifically the one from Gimmighoul. After searching for them for a bit, Roy comes across one, and they decide to look for some more. They search for a bit, but they can't find any more. Just then though, Terapagos goes towards the ruins nearby in the area, and our heroes go down there with it. Here we learn from Miss Rayford that these were forts from the past that used to be inhabited by people. Inside the ruins they find Charcadet, who apparently was helping out nobility in the past, as well as Knackley, who helped people in the past perform rituals for things like warding off evil. Seems like after the people disappeared, the Pokemon decide to move into these former forts. Then we see Roy find a bunch of coins. Rayford sees what happens, so she has our heroes go up on top of the watchtower, which we learn were made by kings to watch over their countries when Paldea was divided. Roy flies on his Kilowattrel, and Rayford goes with her Zoroark, while the rest of our heroes go and freeze Charizard. Once up there, Roy gives up all of his coins to the treasure form Gimmighoul. Turns out that's because Gimmighoul can control humans to search for treasure, only to steal all of them. However, Roy seems happy regardless. As far as Locke was concerned, Rayford tells us the stories say that once upon a time before Paldea, there was a pink Pokemon paradise called Laqua. The land in the past was part of the Paldean Empire, and before that, it was part of another kingdom entirely. This confirms to Freed that Laqua was connected to the Laquarium, and Rayford tells our heroes to continue to look for the past, and also says that you can imagine what the past used to look like, which then causes Liko to see what the past might have looked like. I couldn't tell whether this was Terapagos' doing or Liko's imagination. The dialogue here is a bit confusing. Let me know in the comments what you think it was. Regardless, Rayford tells our heroes to continue adventuring for it, and that if they can believe it, they can find it. And like I said earlier, the episode ends with them getting their next bits of the gym that they're going to be doing. Our heroes decide that they're going to go to Medali first, meaning Dot versus Larry is up next. So an overall chill episode with a backstory and setup. For me, since I played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and did all the school stuff, I already knew about most of this history here, except the things related to Laqua, which also wasn't much anyways. This is an episode for people who haven't really played the games. It gives them some backstory about the Paldea region. We also got to meet Miss Rayford here, who is a lot more menacing in the game. She's a lot more chill here in the anime, and we got to see them set up the Area 0 plotline, which will surely happen in the future. For now though, our heroes will continue with their gym battles, and I can't wait to see how they transition that to the next part of Terapagos' story. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 58 of Pokemon Horizons, titled The Mascot Pokemon is Kingambit, just dropped. In this episode, our heroes help out a struggling restaurant and a Kingambit who's losing his confidence. How? Let's talk about it. Our heroes arrive at Medali for Dot's exam when they come across a couple cleaning a griddle. Dot's Tinkatank runs towards it because of the iron before getting scared away by their Kingambit, so the couple decide to give our heroes lunch to make up for it. The restaurant, called the Anything Eatery, has the Anything meal. It is a giant food plate that has a bit of everything. The reason for this meal is because of the Treasury Eatery. That's the biggest, most prominent restaurant in the area. Everyone is going to that, leaving this restaurant, the Anything Eatery, to not get as many customers. However, Dot notices that while all the flavors being in the food is interesting, they actually have a really good noodle. And that's because of King Gambit. King Gambit, who usually scares away customers because it tries to brute force everything and has a really loud voice, is actually really good at making noodles thin and chewy. As our heroes are eating, the iron griddle of the couple goes missing, so Dot knows that Tink might have done it. She tries to get it, but before she can, it's too late, and that griddle has been turned into a hammer. So our three heroes have to work for this restaurant to help pay it back. Roy and Liko don't mind, however. Liko helps by cleaning the place and keeping the couple from fighting. Dot uses Tink's ability to find good iron to find another good griddle, and Roy is trying to get customers to come in. He's finding it hard, partially because of King Gambit being so intimidating. However, it isn't until King Gambit makes a kid cry inadvertently, and Quaxley is able to calm down that kid, that people take notice. And this is the thing that brings in a bunch of people to the restaurant. Dot notices that King Gambit is sad, however. Everyone then begins working hard as there's a bunch of people in the restaurant, but Dot has to take a break as she's not really meant for labor. The husband also comes out, but it isn't to take a break. He's also noticed that King Gambit has been looking down. Dot thinks it's because they've come in and helped, which changed everything for King Gambit. It's a different time for it. So Dot gets an idea. After everyone leaves, she tells the restaurant owners that the people most likely won't be coming back to this shop. That's because while the food is good, nothing stands out. She tells them that they should really focus on one thing, and from now on, the main dish should be the udon made by the King Gambit. And that's because when people come to eat at a place, they want to be left with an impression of something specific. This is something she learned as a streamer. So if they focus on what they do best, they'll get more people. Just then, Sidian arrives to eat. He notices our heroes, and when Quaxley charges him only to fall, he takes that as a battle challenge. However, Dot uses this moment to devise a plan. She wants King Gambit to work on a large batch of noodles and get it ready. Outside, the battle begins. Quaxley dodges a salt cure before hitting liquidation that gets blocked by iron defense. People then start gathering to see the battle. Another salt core from Garganacko, and Dot has Quaxley go in with low kick and kick the salt everywhere. People are noticing even more. Then a final salt cure that Quaxley kicks away, and it makes a giant explosion, grabs everyone's attention. Dot then has Liko open the restaurant door, and the smell of the noodles are so good. Then Dot has everyone come in to see the Anything Eatery's new item, the Kowtow Cleave Udon. Sidian is shocked as to what happened to his battle, but he's hungry too. People are coming in, and they really seem to be enjoying the noodle much better than the anything food from before. Once most people go away, the husband thanks Dot for helping her and helping King Gambit be happy again. And when the two couple are fighting as our heroes are eating, King Gambit causes them to stop. As this episode ends, we see Larry enjoying the food, saying simple is better and to not lose your beginner spirit. Dot thinks that she saw him, but she lets it go. And that is where we end the episode. I love episodes like this. Sure, it's nothing major in terms of plot, but it is a massive episode when it comes to character development, specifically for Dot. She is shown here as compassionate, as she doesn't get mad at Tink for destroying someone else's pan. Instead, she understands its strength and uses it to her advantage. And she is shown as supremely observant and resourceful due to her live streaming. She seems to have a good business sense and knows how to get attention from a moment in time. She feels the most adult out of the three of our heroes. It's a great episode for Dot as a character, and it makes me excited to see how she deals with another more, quote, adult character in Larry, and she'll take him on next episode. I can't wait. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 59 of Pokemon Horizons titled Dance, Quaxley! Dance the Blue Medallion Dance just dropped, and in this episode, Dot takes on Larry. How will it go? Let's find out. This episode begins with our heroes finding out that Larry isn't at the gym. Instead, he's in the town somewhere. As our heroes go out to look for him, Quaxley hears music and heads towards it. There, it comes across a lady and an Oricorio dancing. Quaxley's impressed with it and goes towards the Oricorio to dance. Dot doesn't want Quaxley to because they're trying to find Larry, but she stays when the lady tells Dot that she will tell her where Larry is after some more dancing. Quaxley shows off its low kick dance, and then the Oricorio shows off its revelation dance, impressing everyone. Quaxley then combines its dance with the revelation dance, and the two dance until the crowd cheers. The lady then tells them where Larry is, which turns out to be the Treasure Eatery. They get inside where they meet Larry. Apparently, Liko and Roy didn't realize it was the same Larry that was doing the Elite Four battles a couple days ago, which is funny. The Treasure Eatery then opens up their floor, and all of a sudden, a battle location is there, which means Dot and Larry can begin their battle. This test, remember, is a test to see how well Dot uses Terastal, not whether she's able to win or lose. The battle begins with Quaxley taking on the Dunsparce. Dot has a strategy going in of using Water Gun to obstruct the Dunsparce's vision before using Liquidation. However, before Dot can execute the plan, the Dunsparce uses Glare to paralyze Quaxley. It then uses Boom Burst on Quaxley, forcing Dot to switch. She then brings out her Tink, who has never battled before. It's scared at first, but Quaxly cheers it on, and it's able to protect itself from the glare from the Dunsparce with its hammer before dodging a drill run and countering back with a brutal swing. The two moves cancel each other out. Dot then has Tinkatink go for another brutal swing, to which Larry responds by switching out to Staraptor and having it use Wing Attack, KOing Tinkatink. The one thing I didn't like here is the anime allowing Larry to switch after a move has already been made. Imagine in the game that you could just switch out after you see what your opponent is going to use. Here, Larry takes a floor-bound Pokemon and switches it out for a flying Pokemon in the middle of Tinkatink's brutal swing. That just doesn't seem fair to me. Regardless, with Tinkatink down, Dot brings her Quaxly back out, and she tries the water gun strategy again, only to get hit by Hurricane from Staraptor. It's able to dodge into the smoke, but when it tries to go for liquidation, the paralysis kicks in, making it get hit with a wing attack. Dot is upset that her strat isn't working, but Larry reminds her that strategies aren't just done by trainers, they're done between trainers and Pokemon. Dot notices that Quaxly's trying to flap its wing like a Staraptor, so she gets an idea. She wants Quaxly to move like the Oricorio, but first, she has Quaxly suck in air like the Dunsparce and use Water Gun on Staraptor, making Water Gun more lethal. She then has it step like Oricorio and use Low Kick, followed by flapping its wings like Staraptor to use Pound on Staraptor. Then, she has it use Liquidation while spinning like Tinkatink. Larry counters with Wing Attack, but during his clash with Staraptor, Quaxly gets a solid hit in and knocks down Staraptor. Then, it happens. Quaxly begins glowing before evolving into a Quaxwell. Dot sees this as the perfect time to Terastalize, so as Quaxwell Terastalize and uses Liquidation, which does massive damage to Staraptor. Before she can finish it off, however, the paralysis from before kicks in. Seeing this, Larry decides he's also going to put on a show and pulls out his Terastal Orb, Terastalizing Staraptor in the process. A single facade from Staraptor instantly KOs Quaxwell, ending the battle swiftly, which means the winner is Larry. Remember though, this battle isn't about winning, it's about whether Dot is able to properly use two Pokemons to battle and use Terastal at the right time, and after Larry's evaluation, he concludes that Dot indeed passed. Dot is also happy that Quaxly has now surpassed her, and now she has to catch up. The episode ends with our heroes trying out the Medalli's secret menu item, which was a quest in the games that you had to figure out. Our heroes seemingly enjoy the meal, and Larry has to pay the bill begrudgingly. A nice episode that gives character development for Dot, and especially Quaxly, who evolved into a Quaxwell. The battle did feel short though. Usually battles in this series, which are rare, are really well done, and here, while the battle is fine, it didn't really feel spectacular in any way. Also, it was probably on purpose, but since Larry's supposed to be a very everyman, unemotional type person, the ending of the battle felt like it came out of nowhere. That was really disappointing. I was hoping to see if Quaxwell would at least be allowed to KO a Pokemon and maybe lose to the Dunsparce, but that wasn't the case. I will say though, I instantly love how Quaxwell looks here in the anime way more than in the game, and in turn it's probably going to give me a better appreciation for this Pokemon. And with Quaxly evolving, that means the only member of our hero's starter Pokemon that hasn't evolved is Fuecoco. I have a feeling that might happen soon for it. As for this episode, I liked it. It could have been better, the battle sequence, but I am glad that Dot was able to get her badge and Quaxly to evolve. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 60 of Pokemon Horizons titled Our First No Fuecoco just dropped, and this is a small slice of life episode where we get to see Roy and Fuecoco get closer together. There might be a reason why we're getting this episode, so let's talk about it. Our heroes are heading to Montenevero for Roy's implementations test. On the way there, they'll have to go through Glaciato Mountain. That's what this episode is about. It focuses mainly on Roy and Fuecoco. The two have never seen or witnessed snow, so they're looking forward to it. Once they get to the snow, they're excited. They jump around in it, they play around in it, they come across some ice Pokemon, including a Frigibax and a Bergmite, which, according to the decks, fight when they see each other. I thought maybe this was just an anime thing, but nope. It seems to be the case in Bergmite Violet Pokedex entry. Anyways, shenanigans happens when ice falls on Fuecoco, which kinda makes it look like a Frigibax. When an actual Frigibax arrive, Bergmite and Frigibax begin fighting with extremely powerful blizzards, and it takes Liko's Hatchram to beat them up and heal them before the two stop. Our heroes also come across a lake where they slide around in, and they also come across a Cubchoo, and in turn, an angry Beartech. After fighting it off, our heroes head to a nearby cabin. Since it's gonna get colder at night, they decide to split up and gather wood for the fireplace. As Roy, Fuecoco, and Kilowattrel are gathering wood, Roy and Fuecoco manage to get split up. and the rest of the episode is them looking for each other. Roy and Fuecoco get close a few times, but just miss each other. It isn't until they begin singing their songs together that Fuecoco is able to hear Roy, and they're able to eventually reunite in this sweet scene. They're even able to stop a Frigibax and a Bergmite from fighting by making the Frigibax look like Fuecoco. It's all cute stuff, and they return to the cabin, having forgotten to grab the wood they were searching for, but having fun nonetheless. The next day, our heroes continue through Glaciado Mountain as they make their way to Montanavera. And that's the episode. It's a pretty simple episode, all things considered. It's a nice episode meant to mainly show the bond between Fuecoco and Roy. So the question is, why? The show doesn't do things like that on accident. So far, they've had tightly scripted arcs where even the episodes that don't seem like they contribute much mean something, even if it's just to develop a character that hasn't gotten any shine. But Roy and Fuecoco don't need an episode like this. We know they're close. They're together all the time and constantly doing stuff together in episodes even when they're not the focus. So what's the point of this episode? My theory is that this is a way for the anime to give us some final moments with Fuecoco, as it's going to evolve soon. Now, I don't think it's going to evolve when you think it might. Dot's Quaxley evolved in the middle of a gym battle. Next episode is Roy facing off against Rhyme. I don't think the evolution will happen here. In fact, I kind of know this because we have the titles for the next couple episodes, and one of them is called Me and Fuecoco's Song, so it's not going to evolve next episode. However, when will it evolve? I actually think it's going to be in that specific episode, which is episode 62. I don't know what the context of it will be, but I think having an episode like this, solely focused on Roy and Fuecoco's dynamic, not battles or trainings or anything of the sort, spells to me that Fuecoco is going to soon become a Crocolore. But that's just my theory. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 61 of Pokemon Horizons titled Resound My Soul, challenging Rhyme just dropped, and in this episode, Roy takes on Rhyme. How will the battle go? Let's find out. Our heroes reach Montanavera, where they learn about the town a little bit before going towards the gym. There, they learn that the gym leader is going to be at the plaza at the live show. While heading there, they come across some Greavyard who takes some of their energy. A cute moment. Then, while eating, Terapagos goes flying on 2 Drifblims. When our heroes have to chase them, Nemona notices them and eventually saves Terapagos, who falls due to the wind. All of them then head to the plaza where they see the MC setting up. Roy asks in the area who Rhyme is as he's trying to do his test, and the MC asks him if he would like to do some rehearsal battle as they're still setting up. Roy agrees. We get a quick battle between Fuecoco and the MC Sableye, which ends with Fuecoco one-shotting with Flame Charge after Roy and Fuecoco sing and get hyped. Rhyme watches this from the side. Rhyme then comes in as everything is set up and does some rapping before asking someone in the crowd to join her. Roy does, but before he can, she asks him to do a rap battle. He's able to respond with a nice little rap about being able to be the best, and Rhyme then accepts his challenge. Roy starts off with Kilowattrel and Rhyme starts off with Houndstone. The Kilowattrel gets a few sparks off, but Houndstone dodges most of them before using Phantom Force, followed by Crunch to KO Kilowattrel quickly. Roy's just battling head on with seemingly no plan. So now it's up to Fuecoco. Similar to the MC battle, Roy and Fuecoco sing together before Fuecoco starts off with Flame Charge. When Houndstone goes for Phantom Force, Fuecoco turns around and hits a flamethrower, KOing Houndstone. The first set of battles happen pretty quickly. Rhyme then asks Roy why he sings with Fuecoco, and Roy answers to win. So she brings out her low-key form Toxtricity. It has Punk Rock as its ability, which allows sound-based moves to do more damage, and it takes less damage from other sound-based moves. So when Roy uses Flamethrower or Stomping Tantrum, Overdrive is able to deflect the move thanks to Punk Rock. When Roy uses Disarming Voice, it doesn't do much thanks to Punk Rock. Roy doesn't know what to do here. Rhyme then goes on the offensive using Hex, which Fuecoco dodges, followed by Overdrive, which Fuecoco does not dodge. So on the verge of losing, Roy decides to Terastalize. Rhyme calls him out on it, saying he's Terastalizing in a desperate manner. However, a Venoshock blinds Fuecoco before an Overdrive finishes it off. With that, Roy is soundly defeated by Rhyme, as she didn't even have to pull out Terastal. She tells them that he's the reason that Fuecoco didn't reach his full potential and that he's a failure of a partner. Really harsh. But with that, Roy is left to think about his defeat, and that is the end of the episode. This episode shows an interesting side of Roy. While he's enthusiastic, he also seems to get overconfident, and that seemingly comes back to bite him here, especially when things get tough. He doesn't seem to know what to do to get out of situations like this. And before this episode, this is something I felt, but this episode kind of confirms it, because there's been situations in the past where Liko has had to save Roy, and with now this being established as kind of a character fault of Roy, it makes sense why. I'm interested to see where this leads to. I've talked about this before, but I always thought Roy was going to be the best battler of the group. But ever since Dot has been added to the consistent traveling companion rotation, she has shown to be the smartest one when it comes to battle. And while Liko isn't the best battler, she seems to have the strongest Pokemon out of the three. So Roy's role in the story has always felt nebulous, especially since the Rayquaza plot got merged with Liko's Terapagos plot. So I'm hoping that by highlighting his loss and his character flaw here, they're able to take his character in a new direction, or at least give him a goal to strive to besides the Rayquaza thing, and give him some more defining characteristics. Hopefully that's what we see soon. As far as this episode is concerned, you could tell that they weren't going to focus on the battle as much. The Sableye battle was a more fun action sequence than the gym battle, but I think that was on purpose. They're probably going to have Roy rematch soon, and hopefully then we get to see not only some strategies being pulled out by both sides, but also the animation for the battle be a bit more fluid. Overall, a solid episode that's hopefully going to lead to better futures for the character of Roy. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 62 of Pokemon Horizons titled Me and Fuecoco's Song just dropped, and here, Roy rematches Rhyme. Will he be able to beat her now? Let's find out. The episode continues from the end of last episode. Roy is down for a while, thinking about what Rhyme said to him about not being a good partner to Fuecoco, but when Liko asks him if he's willing to give up, he gets himself back up, ready for a rematch. But before he can do so, Nemona stops him because he doesn't have a plan. Instead, she asks him if he wants to do some awesome training. And it's not just him, but all of our heroes. First, they sprint in the snow, but only Roy makes it all the way to the target goal. Even Nemona, who came up with the idea, doesn't get far. If you play Scarlet and Violet, then you know that that's part of a character trait. I'm glad the anime remembered. They then roll some snow, only for Dot and Florigato to give up in a funny little bit. Then some actual battle training as Roy and Fuecoco run up a hill while dodging attacks from Palmot, Florigato, and Quaxwell. And eventually, Fuecoco's able to get past all of it using Flamethrower on a snowy tree. While all of them rest afterwards, Liko brings up the question that Rhyme asked last episode, which was, why does Roy sing? And this leads to us learning more about Roy. He does have parents, but turns out they're sailors. That's where Roy learned to sing. His parents had to go on a long voyage, which is why he was with his grandfather. The song that he used to sing with his parents on the boat was the singing that allowed him to be friends with many of the Pokemon in the island. Reminiscing on all this, Roy gets a clue of how you can beat Rhyme, and Nemona decides to help him train, while Dot and Liko decide to stall for time in case he doesn't make it back in time. Liko and Dot arrive at the concert, and eventually the bit where people get involved is about to happen, but Roy's not back yet, and no one in the crowd wants to participate. Even Dot and Liko are too nervous to do so. However, just then, Quaxwell walks up to Rhyme and the MC, forcing our heroes up there. They make up a scenario where Dot and Liko hold up berries in their hands and their head, and Florigato will try to hit all of it before Quaxwell finishes its dance routine. They take their time, and eventually Florigato is successful. After their act finishes, Roy still isn't back yet, but just as Rhyme and the MC are about to move on, Roy appears and re-challenges Rhyme. He tells her that he has cleansed his soul, which is what she told him that he needed to do last episode, so she allows him to have a rematch, telling him that this is a special circumstance. This is a one-on-one Fuecoco vs Loki form Toxtricity. Nemona tells Dot and Liko that he didn't actually train, he just hung out and sung with Fuecoco. And while Fuecoco is definitely showing the results of his training being faster in battle, and it's showing that it's able to dodge and attack much better than before, it's not until he begins to sing a different song, the song that his parents taught him with Fuecoco, that they begin to do much better. This song that he learned from his parents, this is what seems to have made Fuecoco's moves more unpredictable, allowing him to repeatedly dodge while hitting Disarming Voice very close range. And even though it doesn't do a lot of damage, he's able to do it over and over. And this song that the two are also singing is allowing everyone, including the people in the crowd, Quaxwell, and even Florigato, to go crazy. This song seems to have more passion to it, and once Toxtricity is worn out enough, a stomping tantrum causes massive damage to it. This forces Rhyme to Terastalize Toxtricity, and Roy Terastalizes Fuecoco in response. Then, similar to before, Fuecoco with the new song is able to dodge around Toxtricity before tanking a Venoshock to hit a close-range flamethrower. That KOs Toxtricity, which means the winner is Roy. Roy explains to Dot and Liko that when he was reminiscing on his parents, he realized why he was singing before. It wasn't to get stronger like he told Rhyme last episode, instead it was to bond with Pokemon. He sang songs before to bond with the Pokemon in the island with his grandfather, and that's the same reason he originally bonded with Fuecoco. Seeing this resolved, Rhyme passes him, telling him that she feels that Fuecoco has a lot of potential, but it's up to to Roy to bring it all out. And with that, it's only Liko left in her exam. The episode ends as we see that Gersha, the next gym leader that they're going to be battling, watching Roy's battle. First things first, I thought this episode was going to guarantee that Fuecoco was going to evolve, and I was absolutely wrong. Pokemon even recently revealed some merchandise with some Crocolore, so I was convinced. I'm just gonna stop guessing at this point. I was at least right in saying that last episode wasn't going to be the real battle, and that this episode would be the battle with more strategy and better animation. And we got way more fluid animation in this episode, along with some great backstory for a main character. This feels like the first time ever in the Pokemon series that we've seen all three main characters' parents on both ends. I don't know why Pokemon always shied away from that in the past. Actually, I kinda do. I made a short about this a while back, you can check it out. But I like this change in the modern day, because it allows them to tell some actual stories about our heroes, which makes them who they are. In regards to Roy, I'm glad we got to learn more about his background. While I have been very critical of how the writing staff has handled him so far, he's the only one from the trio that has now won both of his battles straight up. That to me is slowly starting to make it feel like the writers are finally committing to him being the best battler of the group. Hopefully he doesn't end up like Tierno. That's all I can ask for. With Gersha being in the end of the episode and the next episode preview, I'm curious as to why the battle is happening so quickly. Is this arc ending soon? Or is Liko going to lose and our heroes will be in Glaciado Gym for a little bit more? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Overall though, I really enjoyed this episode. A great battle and great backstory for Roy. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 63 of Pokemon Horizons titled An Ice Battle. Cold-Eyed Gersha just dropped. In this episode, Liko takes on the Ice-type gym leader Gersha. Will she be able to win? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let's find out. Our heroes barely arrive in Glaciado Mountain, freezing until they begin riding Citadel to the city. Apparently, riding Citadel in the snow like ice skating is what people do here. Before Liko does her gym, they decide they want to do a bit of Citadel ice skating down the hill. Some close call where Florigato has to save Liko by using a tree, and another one where she causes snow to pile up before she falls off a cliff, only to find out that the cliff was like 3 feet deep. That's when they see Gersha for the first time, and the vibe in this meeting is bad from the start, as Gersha questions Liko relaxing and having fun before the gym battle. Once they return to Citadel, they learn a bit more about Gersha. Gersha used to be a champion skateboarder for Glaciado Mountain before he got injured in a tournament. That caused him to retire, and after his injury, he focused on being the best gym leader, and eventually became the best gym leader because he's focused purely on result. Liko gets a call about her test being ready, and so she heads out, wanting to get Gersha to acknowledge her. We get a very nicely animated battle here. Liko starting out with Florigato, and Gersha begins with Tight. Liko tries to use Quick Attack early, only to get hit by Ice Spinner, so she switches out to Hatchram. Hatchram uses Confusion to stop Icicle Spear and send it back. She then tries to stop Ice Spinner with Brutal Swing, however, Hatchram can't do so, and it gets KO'd. This leads back to Florigato. It constantly runs from Ice Spinners for a while until it finds an opening, where it uses Magical Leaf inside of Satitan's Smelt, where Satitan is the weakest, forcing Gersha to switch out. Gersha then brings out Altaria. This is tough for Liko, as Altaria quad resists Florigato, and as it's in the air, Florigato struggles to hit it while it has to constantly dodge a barrage of Moonblast. That is until Liko remembers Florigato using her Flower Bud Bind to grab things to save her during the ice skating with the Citadel. So she has Florigato get close to the Altaria and grab the Altaria in the leg by the bud and pull it down before using Acrobatics. And I'm pretty sure that's a brand new move that she seemingly learned off screen, unless I'm remembering wrong. Liko then terastalizes, remembering her previous battles, but Gersha also terastalizes Altaria into an ice type. That puts Liko at a massive disadvantage. Liko tries to have Florigato use Magical Leaf, but Gersha's Altaria responds with Ice Beam, which pushes back Magical Leaf and KOs Florigato, which means the winner is Gersha. Liko's hopeful that maybe she can pass the test based on how she battled, however, Gersha straight up fails her, saying she didn't get the result. And this one seems to be one that Liko won't be able to get a redo on like Roy did. And that's the end of the episode. I was thinking about this while watching this episode, but something I miss about the old anime is that it would expand the story of the games to give us extra characterization of the people from the games in the anime. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. That's especially true with Gersha here, who has exactly the same story in the game as he does in this episode of the anime, with very minimal changes. He's strict just like in the game, he's all about the results just like in the game, and we don't get to learn more about him. Maybe Liko will get to eventually rematch him and we'll get to learn more about him then. But as of now, he feels like such a nothing character to me. Someone who seemed to have a grudge against Liko since the first battle he saw of her and has held it all the way through now. As for Liko, her battles are always the best animated and look the best, even though she loses. And I was thinking about this, but where is this heading? I was worried about Roy because it seems like he was the one getting shafted, but honestly, I should have been saying that about Liko, because while Liko gets the flashy battles and the emotion put in her battle, Liko doesn't win. And I realized she hasn't won any of her gym challenges stuff. Where is this leading to? I'm interested to see. With Liko not being able to re-challenge, I wonder where the story is headed next. And the next episode is also the return of the explorers, but she's still in Glaciato Mountain. So maybe something will happen here that'll allow her to get a rematch? I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 64 of Pokemon Horizons titled The Creeping Shadow on Glaciato Mountain just dropped, and in this episode, the explorers return and Liko is in a bind. How will she get out of it? Like this video if you like it, subscribe if you enjoy, and let's talk about it. Liko is bummed that she failed her test. However, in order to cheer up, Roy decides he wants to go on the top of Glaciato Mountain since that's one of the 10 sites of Paldea. Liko feels like she's been moping, so she agrees to do so. Turns out though, they've been found by the explorers, specifically Spinel and Charles. Amethio seems to have followed Spinel to find out what Spinel did in the Exceed company. Remember, that's when he went into Freed's old company and stole the Requirium, making it look like it was Freed who did it. As our heroes head up the mountain, Liko's sad and not paying attention, so when Charles' Medicham uses Psychic to move massive boulders to block the location where Liko is supposed to be headed, and instead opens another path, then after she goes through that path, closes the path with the boulder again, splitting her up from the group, she doesn't notice what's going on. Afterwards, Amethio notices Spinel and follows him, only to lose him. He then comes across Liko, who's now been split up. He finds this meeting to be strange, however, he still wants to use this opportunity to battle. We get a nice battle between the two, as Florigacha takes on Surrey Ledge, and Liko does really well in the battle early on, dodging all of Amethio's attack and attacking him from range. However, the battle turns in Amethio's favor when he terastalizes his Surrey Ledge. That makes his moves do more damage as he goes for Phantom Force over and over again, and Liko doesn't know what to do in this situation as she can't figure out how to block Phantom Force. It reminds her of her battle with Grusha, but before Amethio can finish her off, he is stopped by Spinel's Umbreon. Spinel says he has his own goals and pulls out the Requirium. It causes some pink mist to come out and makes Umbreon seemingly feral and super powerful, as it's able to KO the Ceruledge in a single hit even though it's been terastalized. Sensing this, Terapagos jumps out of the bag, and when Spinel holds out the Requirium, angry, it goes into its Terastal form and seemingly absorbs all the mist as well as destroys the Requirium crystal, fainting afterwards. Seeing this seems to be enough for Spinel as he runs away. With no answers on anything, however, Amethio chases him, and wanting answers for herself, Liko follows. Spinel goes inside of a cave where he's followed by the two, only for him to block the two of them inside as he teleports outside with his Beheeyum. And this is where we learn some important things. First, Terapagos and Requirium are opposed to one another, but unless I'm remembering it wrong, isn't Requirium from Laqua? So it seems strange that the place Terapagos wants to go to would have something that it's opposed to. Seeing how powerful it can seemingly make Pokemon, it explains why Gibeon might be after this, but the strange connection to Terapagos still hasn't been explained. We also see that seemingly the rest of the explorers do not like, or at least don't seem to be thrilled with Amethio or the fact that he's Gibeon's grandson. Spinel talks about making Amethio disappear. So, a murder plot, which is insane for a show like this. They never bring up stuff like actual human murder. Meanwhile, back inside the cave, Amethio is trying to break through the rocks to reopen up the entrance, but seemingly isn't powerful enough to do so. Terapagos, though, then wakes up, but once he sees Amethio, gets very upset. We also learn and see that Chao sent Coral and Sidian towards Roy and Dot to stop them from helping out Liko. And we get to see that as Roy and Dot call Freed to let him know that Liko's disappeared. As he's on his way here, however, he calls Grusha beforehand. That's when Coral and Sidian show up in front of Roy and Dot. The two of them transform out of their school uniform into their explorer's outfit and throw out their Pokemon ready to battle. And that's where we end the episode. A lot happens here in this episode. I knew Spinel was doing his own thing, but seemingly now Chalice is too? Or is she doing the same thing Spinel is doing? I can't figure out what the explorer's current objective is. I thought they were waiting until all of the Rising Voltacklers caught the 6-hero Pokemon, but there seems to be other things happening in the background that we haven't been made aware of. And the whole Laqua and Requirium connection with Terapagos is so strange. The episode seemingly shows that the two are not compatible, yet the item seems to create the same mist that Terapagos creates when showing our heroes its memories. So I'm not sure what is going on here. And it seems Freed will finally be reintroduced to the story after being gone for a while, and we might get to soon learn what the actual goals of the explorers are. Specifically right now for Spinel and Chao, since it seems to be different from what Gibeon wants. Maybe? Again, I can't tell. So many different things happening here. I'm intrigued to see where all of this goes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 65 Pokemon Horizons titled Liko and Ametheo just dropped, and in this episode, Liko and Ametheo are stuck in the cave from last episode and have to try to find a way to get out. Will they be able to? Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for more, and let's find out. Continuing from last episode, as Liko and Ametheo are stuck down in the cave, the first things they have to figure out is calming down Terapagos. But surprisingly, when Ametheo tells Terapagos that it isn't planning on doing anything, it believes him and heads back to Liko's backpack. Meanwhile, Roy and Dot are stopped from finding Liko by Sidian and Coral. They have their Pokemon out and are seemingly there just to waste time. When Roy and Dot try to get their Pokemon to run, they get stopped, and anytime they do damage on the explorer's Pokemon, Garganacl just uses Recover, putting them back in square one. Down in the caves, it's starting to get really cold. However, when Florigato brings Liko some plants, Liko realizes that Cerulege can burn it and create a fire for the both of them there. As the two sit by the fire, we get a conversation between Liko and Ametheo. Ametheo asks why Liko hesitated during their battle when Cerulege terastalized, and Liko explains that she was taking the Terastal course in order to learn more about Terapagos, but she ended up failing. She thought all of her hard work was paying off, but now it's gone. But Ametheo questions if one stumbling block is enough to make her quit. Liko thinks about everything she's gone through for now and decides she isn't done yet. Liko then asks Ametheo why he saved her back then when they were fighting the Rayquaza, saying that while the explorers are evildoers who want Rayquaza and Terapagos, Ametheo feels different. We learn that Ametheo is doing this mission in order to fulfill his grandfather's dream to go to Laqua. That's why he's after the Rayquaza and Terapagos, but hearing his response doesn't seem to make Terapagos happy. However, Liko calms down Terapagos and explains to him that Terapagos also wants to go to Laqua, so she decides to take him there. That revelation surprises Ametheo as he didn't know that prior, and Liko says that she's glad she ended up asking because she wouldn't have known about his goals otherwise. She says that it seems the two of them are following the same goal, but they have different paths. Ametheo then notices some wind coming into the cave and realizes there's an exit, so he calls Liko by name as he decides they're going to leave this cave. The two work together using all of their Pokemon, Cerulege and Florigato on the back of Corviknight to destroy the cave wall, and Liko's Hatchram to catch the massive rubble falling from the ceiling and destroying it in order to create an opening. Meanwhile, Roy and Dot are seemingly on the road. That is until Grusha arrive. With their job to stall for time seemingly now done, Sidian and Coral leave. Grusha tells Roy and Dot that he got a call from Freed, so he helps them look for Liko. Liko and Ametheo get out of the cave as he helps her up. He warns Liko about Spinel, and Liko asks Ametheo that since their goals are the same, if he wants to join the Voltacklers instead of fighting. But he says that that's not possible because while their goals are the same, their path to it are different, and walks away. Liko then walks the opposite way with Florigato, but we find out that Spinel's Beheeyum was watching that whole interaction. Grusha comes to the spot where Liko got separated and realizes that the rock there got moved. When he breaks the rock with Altaria, Liko's behind it, and our heroes reunite. It seems Freed had also gotten there, but he didn't need to be there. Grusha takes them to the house and opens up some fire before heading out. Liko thanks Grusha and apologizes for making him worry. The four of them then have a conversation about what Spinel might have wanted. Liko explains to Freed that he used the Loquium to make pink mist and make the Umbreon go on a rampage before Terapagos used its powers to stop it and destroy the crystal. Freed tells their heroes to keep an eye out and says that he will fill in the rest of the crew on everything. But before they head back to Narhana Academy, Liko wants to do something. That is that she wants to go to the top of Glaciata Mountain. They reach there, and there they're able to get a fantastic view of Paldea and take a picture together. Back at the explorer's base, Ametheo arrives as he got called. Turns out that's because Spinel recorded the whole interaction between him and Liko and used that to say that Ametheo was working with the enemy. Before Ametheo can explain himself, Ametheo's grandfather Gibeon says that he's disappointed in Ametheo and says that he's the same. I think most likely referring to his father, who he's talked about in the past, and kicks him out of the Explorer. And that is where we end the episode. Wow, what an ending. I did not see that coming. I knew that Spinel was definitely up to something, and he and Chao's last episode said that they wanted to get rid of Ametheo, but I thought that was referring to trapping him in the cave. I didn't realize he was also planning on recording him getting out with Liko in order to get him kicked out. That was unexpected. This opens up some opportunities for Ametheo's character as a whole. What will he do next? He's probably still going to pursue Laqua in order to make his grandfather proud because that's seemingly his goal. And I have a feeling that at the end, his grandfather's going to betray him somehow. This feels like such a get this and end situation. This does finally allow for his two grunts, who have been away from the series for so long at this point, to be back in his episodes. They'd kind of gotten replaced by Sidian and Coral, but now that he's no longer part of the Explorers, it allows those two to return and have have their own reasons for being in this series. The only other major thing in this episode is the conversation between Liko and Amethio. Since Amethio is no longer an explorer, it allows him to be more of an anti-hero of sorts. I don't expect him to join the Volt Tacklers, but I also think that he's going to help out the heroes when necessary. This creates an interesting dynamic now, where there's the rising Volt Tacklers, the explorers, and now Amethio is a wild card. I'm curious to see where his story's headed. Overall, an incredible episode. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 66 of Pokemon Horizons titled System Intrusion Crisis at Naranja Academy just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes try to stop the explorers from hacking into the school system to grab information about Terapagos. Will they be able to stop the explorers? Let's find out. Our heroes are back from their Terastal implementation tests in front of Clavel and Gita at Naranja Academy. Clavel explains to all of the students that the students that pass their test will get their official Terastal orb later. However, for now, since this is going to be their final day as students in the same course, they've organized a battle tournament with the students, all 1v1s. As our heroes are watching Anne battle, Dot gets a call. It's from Penny. She asks Dot to meet her at the nurse's room in the school. Once Dot gets there, we learn why. The school is currently being hacked, and Penny suspects it's Chalice. Penny says that she's only pretending to be a teacher here, but she is from the Explorers. Hearing this, Dot figures out what Chalice is probably after. Dot explains to Penny who the Explorers are and what they're after, and she remembers that Director Clavel showed our heroes some information on Terapagos and it being spotted at Area 0 a while back. That's the data that the Explorers are most likely after. They head to Director Clavel's room only to find it empty. When they check his laptop, they see that it's being remotely accessed and that Chalice is somewhere else. Now they have to try to stop her. Now, I usually don't complain about stuff like this, but as someone who works with technology, there are two technological geniuses here who don't just automatically try to shut the computer off by holding the power button. Isn't that the easiest way to prevent a remote access? Whatever, I digress. The only other way to access computers in the network are through the teacher's room, so they know that Chalice is in another teacher's room. This is where Dot calls Liko and Roy for help. She tells them that the explorers are trying to attack the school and has them go to the different rooms of the teachers to try and figure out where Chalice could be. They're eventually able to narrow down her location, but Roy then comes across Coral outside of the art room. Liko hears an explosion when she's at the economics room and goes to see what's happening. She sees that the security guard was attacked and he has salt all around him, so she knows that Sidian is here. She has her Hatchram help them out and heads to the roof where she comes across Sidian. And Dot spots Chalice hacking the school data and takes a picture of her. This then splits our heroes up into 3 different battles, and I'll go through them individually. Let's start with Roy, who at first is just trying to avoid attacking Coral in the school, especially because he's in the art room where he doesn't want Fuecoco's fire to burn down art pieces. So he calls out his kilowatt roll and flies outside of the room so that he can begin battling without restraint. We cut in and out of this battle so we don't get to see too much of it. However, at the end, Roy's Fuecoco's flamethrower is able to overpower Glalie Blizzard, allowing him to KO Coral's Pokemon. As for Dot, she tries to bust into the room where Chalice is, but is stopped by Chalice's Medicham. While she's trying to deal with that, Penny is in Director Clavel's room trying to stop the data breach. Neither are successful as they want to be. However, Dot's Tinkatink manages to sneak into the room where Chalice is hacking. It jumps from the top and breaks the PC where the data is being taken from, but it's too late. The transfer has already been complete and they're not able to stop it. Chalice calls back her Medicham and calls in her Xatu in order to teleport away. Grusha, who is just chilling inside of the library, comes across the security guard that was attacked earlier being healed by Hatchram. Hatchram then has Grusha and Citadel follow her upstairs where Liko is, and this is where Liko is battling against Sidian. Sidian wants Liko to hand over Terapagos, but Liko is not going to allow him to do so. And this is the battle that gets the most focus. It's also an incredibly well animated battle. Liko is able to dodge most of Sidian's attack using acrobatics and quick attack. However, anytime she's able to hit Magical Leaf or acrobatics to do massive damage to Garganackle, it seems not to be too effective because he's able to just use Recover over and over again. Eventually, Sidian terastalizes his Pokemon in order to increase the powers of his move and hits a Salt Cure on Florigato. Liko knows that she doesn't have too much more time to finish this battle, so even though she knows she's not allowed to, in order to protect her Pokemon and the school, she terastalizes her Florigato. Florigato is then able to jump out of the way of another Salt Cure attack and counter with Magical Leaf. This time, she redirects the Salt Cure away before redirecting the Magical Leaf back into Garganackle and hitting it dead on. This KOs it. Afterward, Sidian is forced to retreat in his Aerodactyl, but tells Liko to remember his name. Chalice calls Coral to tell her to retreat, and even though she doesn't want to, Sidian picks her up in the Aerodactyl too, and the two fly away from school. In the aftermath of the battle, Penny and Dot are talking on the phone. Even though they weren't able to secure the data, they were able to get evidence of who did it, keep the damage to a minimum, and they didn't cause a ruckus that got the battle tournament cancelled. So for that, Penny thanks Dot. Liko's battle was being watched by Grusha the whole time. In the aftermath of her battle, he asks her to meet him at the principal's office. There, he says that he realizes he was wrong about the type of person Liko was. He says that her true strength shows up when she's trying to protect something, and because of that, he passes her implementations test. Gita and Director Clavel also thank Liko for helping protect the school. As our heroes meet back where the battle tournament's taking place, Roy and Dot congratulate Liko on passing her exam. This means that now all three of them can use the Terra Orb. Just then, Dendro arrives to tell them who they're going to be facing off in the battle tournament next, and it turns out it's going to be Liko versus Roy. And that's where we end the episode. This was a really great episode. A few different things happened here that I really enjoyed. First, it seems like they've now given each of our heroes a specific admin that they'll be facing off in the future. Liko against Sidian, Roy against Coral, and Dot against Chalice. I could be wrong about that, but that's what it felt like they established this episode. They're also subtly establishing the strength dynamics of this team, which I really appreciate. Roy is able to defeat his opponent the easiest because he's the strongest in the group in terms of pure battle. Liko is also strong, but she requires an external thing. In this episode, it was motivation to protect Terapagos and the school, and I like that her external strength is represented via her terastalizing. That's a great visual metaphor. As for Dot, while she's not able to win her battle, nonetheless, she's also the most clever when it comes to utilizing her Pokemon's strength to the best. In this case, she's able to use Tinkatink's size and hammer to try to destroy the PC. Each individual person got a representation of the type of character they are and the type of battler they are, and I really like that. It feels like the show has finally figured out what the characteristics of each of the different protagonists will be moving forward. Even though the next story arc doesn't start until October, this felt like a wrapping up point for this part of the story. Our heroes are able to accomplish what they wanted in this arc, which was to become stronger and get the ability to terastalize. The explorers are also able to accomplish what they want, which is learn more about Terapagos, Loquium, and after this episode, they have information on Area 0. And I didn't think about this until later, but because they were able to sneak into the school, they were also able to get Terra Orb for Sidian and Coral, which was able to make them stronger. The only remaining story thread is the Rising Voltaclers getting their ship back, figuring out where they want to go next, and I have a feeling that those things will be established in the final episode of this arc. As for the next episode, I'm really looking forward to it. From the preview, it looks like it's going to be an episode that's mainly battle focused, and we haven't had that episode in a while. I'm really looking forward to two of our main heroes duking it out. I can't wait. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 67 of Pokemon Horizons titled Shine Terastalization, Liko vs. Roy just dropped, and this is the final episode of the Terastal debut arc where we get Liko vs. Roy to end it off. How will it go? Let's find out. We start with Dot taking on Ray, the other student that they helped in episode 53 that looks similar to them. Ray's the one that kind of looks like Roy. Dot terastalizes her Quaxwell and uses liquidation to take care of Darumaka. Afterwards, he congratulates her on her win, talking about the fact that he isn't surprised she's this strong since she was able to beat the bad guy sneaking into the school. It seems Penny told people, and now it's gone around everywhere. That also goes for Liko and Roy, who are seen as heroes for helping protect the school, so everyone's looking forward to their battle. In fact, Rhyme does a quick rap introducing their battles, and the two are ready to face off against each other. Before they start, Roy has a bit of a conversation with Nimona and Rhyme, and Liko has some small talk with Katie and Anne. They all wish Liko and Roy the best for their battle, then the two emerge in the battlefield, ready to go and give it their all. Roy starts with Fuecoco and Liko starts with Florigato. The battle begins with a clash of flamethrowers and Magical Leaf. When the two moves collide and cancel each other out, physical moves are next, with Quick Attack and Flame Charge. The first time, Florigato gets a hit in with Quick Attack, but the second time, the Flame Charge makes Fuecoco faster, so it's able to get a hit on Florigato. The two seem evenly matched for now. Liko then has Florigato grab Fuecoco with its flower, bud, vine thingy. Roy tries to have Fuecoco run for it, but eventually, Florigato is able to control the bud and spin spin Fuecoco in the air a bunch of times before slamming him down. This forces Roy to switch due to early damage, and Roy switches to his Kilowattrel. Similar to how she KO'd Grusha's Altaria, Liko tries to have Florigato grab onto Kilowattrel's leg with the Flower Bud, but Roy has seen that too much and sends Kilowattrel flying high in the air to send Florigato flying. Before Kilowattrel can dive and do a similar attack to Florigato that Florigato did to Fuecoco, Liko has Florigato use Magical Leaf to soften its landing. The Elite Fours and even Gita, who are all watching, notice that Liko is way more confident in her battle skills now. Liko goes for another Magical Leaf, but Roy has Kilowattrel dodge it by flying in the air. While Magical Leaf's an attack that usually can't miss, Roy isn't having Kilowattrel just fly around to dodge it. Instead, as Larry and Rhyme point out, it's building speed to build its electrical charge in its wings. Once Roy sees that it's ready, he has Kilowattrel dive straight through the Magical Leaf. Liko has Florigato counter its scratch, but the spark is too strong and sends Florigato flying back. When it gets up, it's paralyzed. So, seeing this, she calls it back. Then, she sends out Hatcham. Roy attacks with Spark once again from Kilowattrel, but Hatcham sends it flying with Confusion. Roy counters with Uproar to stop the Confusion attack before firing back with another Spark. Hatcham tries to block the second Spark with Confusion, but it gets hit. Then, Roy has Kilowattrel go for another Spark. Liko tries to have Hatcham dodge it, but instead, it cures the status of Florigato, who's in Liko's Pokeball, before going down for Spark. Turns out, Hatcham's ability is Healer, so it can clear status moves for Pokemon that are in the party. With Florigato back out in the field and no longer paralyzed, Roy goes for another Spark. Liko tells Florigato to use its Flower Bud only to remember what happened last time, so she tells it to stop. That causes the Flower Bud to go everywhere all over the place, distracting Kilowattrel, allowing Florigato to KO it from above with Scratch. Liko realizes what happened there. She realized that she can use her Vine to distract and then attack. Kind of like a surprise attack. Liko realizes what happened there and tells Florigato that they can turn that surprise attack into a new move. With Kilowattrel down, Roy brings out Fuecoco. Roy has Fuecoco go for Flamethrower, but Liko does the exact same thing that she just did to Kilowattrel, sending the Flower Bud one way and attacking from another side. This turns the move Scratch from earlier now into Sucker Punch. Roy asks Liko if he remembers their first battle, and we get to see how far our heroes have evolved as battlers. At first, they didn't know what they were doing, but slowly over time, they gained more confidence in their ability to battle. Liko says that she battled Roy over and over again and trained with him, and Roy says that Liko helped him make him stronger. While this flashback is occurring, by the way, it's being interspersed with more attacks between the two presently. A Magical Leaf from Florigato gets countered by Flamethrower, a Flame Charge is countered by a Sucker Punch, which Roy has to stop Fuecoco from using so it doesn't get hit by the Sucker Punch. He then has Fuecoco use Stomping Tantrum, which Florigato dodges. The two Pokemon then clash with a Quick Attack and a Flame Charge, and Liko and Roy both say that if they are with each other, they can go even further. This gets Fuecoco even more excited for the battle, and Fuecoco's hair glows yellow. They then begin singing the new song that Roy and Fuecoco came up with during their battle with Rhyme, and this gets the entire school chanting and singing excited. This finally peaks with Fuecoco jumping up when a blue light consumes it. It evolves into a Crocolore. After seeing it evolve, Florigato wants to go all out, and Roy and Crocolore feel the same. The two use their Terastal orbs to terastalize their respective Pokemon. This then leads to a clash of Flamethrowers and Magical Leaf. The Flamethrower outpowers the Magical Leaf, and Florigato dodges the Flamethrower before Liko has it use Quick Attack. Roy counters with Flame Charge, and the two go flying and colliding in midair, causing a massive explosion. However, from that explosion, we see that Florigato has fallen, which means the winner is Roy. The two of them then shake hands afterwards, and the crowd goes crazy. The aftermath and the end of the battle tournament is a lot of congratulations to our heroes from a bunch of different people, so I'll split it up per person because it's a lot of cutting back and forth in the episode itself. Nimona tells Roy that the trainer she had an eye on didn't let her down, and Rhyme tells him that she shook her to her soul. Hassel was moved by the battle, and Brassius congratulates Roy. As for Dot, she gets a nod of approval from Larry. Iono calls Dot to ask about how the battle tournament went, and Poppy arrives, and Dot tells her that it felt good to win a battle that was satisfying to win. This obviously referring to how Dot was unsatisfied with her team battle, where she felt like she didn't do much. Then later, when Dot is snooping on a conversation between Liko and Rika and Gita, she's surprised when Penny calls her Nido thing. Turns out that's because she's a big fan. Not only that, but she's thankful that Dot helped out the school. And finally for Liko, Anne tells Liko that she'll work even harder in Indigo Academy so she can have awesome battles. The two agree to have a battle later in the future. Rika then tells Liko that it was an exciting battle, and Gita tells Liko that if she she gets a chance, she should challenge the Pokemon League. Katie congratulates Liko on finishing the course, and Grusha tells her that she lost against him, but that means that she can still improve, and tells her to drop by her gym in the future if she wants. The three heroes head out of the school as their Terastal course is over. This means the next thing for them is the beginning of a new adventure. Finally, to end the episode, we check back on the explorers. First, a gag where we see Sidian bring a sandwich to Coral, and when he asks her if she likes sandwiches, she says not particularly before asking him, and then when we pan over to him, he's eating a onigiri, the two names that they used for their fake school name identity. That's pretty funny. Then we cut to Spinel, who's looking through the data that they were able to collect from the school with Chouse. It seems like the two are doing their own thing, as they aren't telling Hamber what they're doing, and that's where we end the episode. This is definitely the best arc of this entire series so far from start to finish. There's a few reasons why, but one of the major ones, which this episode really shows off well, is that a lot of characters were introduced in this arc, and in this final episode, almost all of them are out here. The gym leaders that our heroes faced, both in the basics and implementations test, the Elite Four that our heroes took on in double battles, even the students that they came across. It felt like everyone who was a part of this arc was here for the conclusion. That's true even for the explorers who were involved in this arc, minus Metheo. And that really puts a nice bow on this arc. The only person I'd say that isn't true for is Arven. He's introduced in this episode but doesn't say or do much, but I have a feeling that when our heroes inevitably head to Area Zero in the future, he's going to be involved somehow. Speaking of which, I'm still not fully confident what the explorers' goals still fully are. It seems like a fractured bunch with multiple sides wanting multiple different things. Ametheo was banished, but he was just trying to help his grandfather. Sidian is the definition of a grunt who just helps out the group with whatever. And Coral seems to be someone who just wants to battle with her Glalie and blow things up with self-destruct. Meanwhile, Gibeon wants to go to Laqua and do something with or against Lucius's adventure. That's still not clear yet. And Spinel seems to be doing testing on Laquium, looking at the data from the school with Chouse, separate from the others with his own goal in mind. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future with this group, but I'm really eager to find out. This arc overall was an enjoyable one. We don't get much battles in this series, so seeing an arc mainly focused on battles felt nostalgic. It reminded me of the Ash anime where that was the main norm. And to their credit, Horizons didn't shortchange the important battles either. All the important battles had great art and animation to make sure that the battles were good and were memorable. This arc is going to be really hard to top, but if anything can, it's going to be the next arc. We've already seen the trailer for it, but our heroes heading to Kitakami, where we meet some of the DLC characters from the game. Where is this all leading to? I can't wait to find out. What about you guys? Give me your thoughts not only on this episode, but the entire arc as a whole. Let me know in the comments down below.